Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Can I first just? I can see I see 9 people. Can you all hear me? If you can indicate, and then I'll know I'm audible. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you, Malcolm.
Yes,
Good. Malcolm,
okay.
I can hear you.
Right.
Yes, you can hear you.
Okay, right. I'm going to start by reading a script which has been given to me, like is given to chairs of all council committees at the moment. Good morning. Welcome to this. Sorry? Can I suggest everybody else switches their microphones off?
And their cameras.
Yeah, and cameras as well for the moment, yes. I'll comment on that in a minute. I think that will be best. Welcome for the 3rd time of trying to this virtual meeting of Cornwall Council's Electoral Review Panel. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. If the council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try to re-establish their connection. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video, and I will add that I would suggest that videos and microphones are off at other times. There have been unfortunate incidents already at previous meetings. If I call members, as I call members to speak, I will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the democratic officer will advise you. The votes will be taken by using the raise your hand function button and the result announced by the Democratic Services officer. Where a member has declared a non-registerable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership, although I don't think that will apply to this meeting, in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. To confirm the procedure for today's meeting is that committee members who wish to speak on an item should indicate by typing X in the chat box. I will try to follow that, but if I miss anybody, I'm hoping the Vice Chair and also officers can help me. That's the end of the announcements. I will now, before we start today's agendaed business, I will ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm members' and officers' attendance.
Thanks, Chairman. I take it everybody can hear me. So at the moment, we've only got one apology for late arrival from Councillor Frost. Other than that, we have all members of the committee in attendance. And with regards to officers in attendance, we have Sophie Hoskin, Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods. We have Alex Polak, Head of Councillor Support and Democratic Process. Stephen Taylor, Interim Governance Lawyer. Andrew Harry, Community Governance Review Project Officer. Simon Mould, Head of Community Safety and Localism, and we have Sarah Mason in attendance as well from CALC, and my name is Steve Childs. I'm the Democratic Officer for the meeting.
Steve, I'm not trying to tell you what you should do, but I think you're meant to invite the councillors who are members of the panel today to confirm their name and the division that they represent. And if so, can you do that alphabetically, please?
Yeah, of course. So, blimey, I don't have an alphabetical list in front of me, but I do have a list of the committee membership as per the agenda. Would you be happy for me to write through?
Any order, as long as we all get in at some point.
Absolutely. Well, if we kick off with the chairman, then if you'd like to go first, Councillor Brown.
Yep, I'll confirm. My name is Malcolm Brown. I'm councillor for St Austell, Bethel.
Okay, so Councillor Frost has sent apologies for late arrival, so then it's Councillor Kenny, please.
Good morning, Joanna Kenny, Newquay Pentire.
Councillor Mike Thomas, please.
Councillor Mike Thomas, present from Helston North. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moorcroft, please.
Yeah, Robin Moorcroft, Weybridge West. This is my first actual meeting of this group.
Okay. Councillor Wood, please.
Good morning, Councillor John Wood, Ropes Division.
Councillor Bastin, please.
Good morning, John Bastin, Constantine, Morland and Burdock. Also my first attendance with this group.
Councillor Formosa, please.
Good morning, Mark Formosa, Mr. Regis.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, please.
Good morning, I'm Vice Chairman, Councillor Cole from St Eneder Division.
Thank you. And I believe Councillor Frost has joined us. Are you there, Councillor Frost?
Hello, yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Lee Frost, Bobinson Petrock Division.
Ideal. Thank you. That's everybody.
Thank you very much. I'll say something briefly about leavers and joiners, if I can put it that way, after items 1 and 2. Item 1, apologies for absence. I think, Steve, we've been advised that all the committee are in attendance.
Yes, that's correct. Everyone's here.
Okay. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. I don't think there are likely to be any, but I'll just ask if any member wishes to declare an interest. No. Okay. Before going on to item 3, the minutes, I just want to say just a couple of points very briefly. Firstly, John Bastin and Robin Moorcroft have both already said that this is their first meeting as members. I want to welcome them. Councillor Bastin has actually been in a regular attendance because of his divisional interests. But I also want to express my thanks to Councillor Eddy, who has left the committee and made a very valuable contribution while he was here, and also to ex-Councillor McCrory, who I suppose you could say has moved on to higher things, and again, I thought undertook her role extremely well. Councillor Rouse, I don't think you were actually called to speak, were you? Or did I miss it?
No, I think I was missed, Chair. But
yeah, could you speak? And while you're on, could you pass on to Cherilyn my sincere thanks, the thanks of the council and of the panel for the contribution she made. She had a very difficult role because she was leading the Conservative members, but she did it in a way which was not political and very dignified.
Absolutely, of course I will. And good morning, all. Jordan Rouse. Cornwall Councillor for Parr and St Blazygate. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you. As regards officers, since the last meeting of this panel, our lead officer, Paul Masters, has left the council and is now working for the Council of the Isles of Scilly. It's been decided that Sophie Hosking, who has taken his job on the council, is going to perform his role. And Sophie, if you'd just like to say 1 or 2 words a minute, that might be appropriate.
Hello, members. Very nice to be back in Cornwall. I've actually spent most of my local government career in Cornwall, starting as a committee administrator back in 1991, and I've worked in most departments and directorates ever since. Joining together with the new Cornwall Council in 2009, and then I went over to Devon, to West Devon Borough Council and South Hams District Council for the last 5.5 years, where I've been the chief executive there. So delighted to be back in Cornwall, and I'm very happy to have the neighbourhood's remit. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we will benefit from your advice as necessary. I also want to welcome Andrew Harry, who has joined the team and has been doing some of the background work since we last met. Dan Webb isn't any longer working on the electoral review, although that may change in future. And I also want to welcome back Simon Mould and Steve Foster, who were both here today, but have been doing really important work about the sort of follow-up to the outbreak of the pandemic. So it's a bit like a soap opera returning with a few changes to the lead actors, but that's the way I see it. So I'll now move on to items 3, 4 and 5, which are the minutes of the 3 meetings. We didn't think it worth having a meeting just to confirm the meetings, although the minutes were actioned in the run-up to the special council at the end of last year. In each case, I will ask members if anybody has any points of accuracy, then I'll propose them, ask the vice chair to second them, and we will vote using the hands up button. So take first of all item 3, the meeting on the 22nd of October. Are there any queries or points of accuracy anybody wishes to raise? No. In that case, I will move that they be adopted.
Happy to second, Malcolm.
Right, all those in favour, raise your hands, please.
That's carried, Chairman.
Is that unanimous?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
By the way, I'm pleased to see that even councillors who were present voted for the minutes. I've never thought you need to be present to vote for them. So those are approved. So now we'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting on the 4th of November. Are there any points of accuracy on those minutes? No. In that case, I will propose.
I will second.
All those in favour, raise their hands, please.
Yeah, that's carried as well, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everyone lowers their hands. So item 5, the last lot of minutes for the 15th of November. Any points of accuracy from anyone? Okay, I will move them.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favour, please raise their hands.
Carried, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we now move on to the main issue today. Item 6, the Community Governance Review Stage 4 update. We have important decisions to make. I'm going to try and structure the meeting quite carefully, but I will take breaks periodically. But for now, what I would like to do is to invite Alex Polak to introduce the officer report, please.
So good morning, members and everybody else present. Thank you, Malcolm. I'm quite mindful as I speak now that I'm sort of speaking for the record. So I'm addressing the members who are present here on this Teams call, but also those many representatives of parish councils and other interested groups that I'm sure will be either watching now or later on the webcast. Please excuse me. I'm going to take a little longer than I might normally to introduce the report because there are a few key things I think worth saying at this stage. So there are, from my perspective, coming at it from my perspective, three purposes of this item today. So, firstly, we're reporting very briefly on phase 3 of the review, as we called it, which was the consultation phase. That was a 3-month formal consultation that completed exactly as lockdown started. The second is to report on the impact of the pandemic on the progress of this review. And the third is to raise the very significant issue of how we proceed now that very little time remains before our intended deadline of the 2021 elections. And it's a chance chance for the panel to gauge members' appetites and to discuss this issue and give officers a steer. This report doesn't invite discussion of particular areas of Cornwall. I know some members may want to raise them, and I'm sure they might be useful as examples as we go through, but we're quite carefully not raising any debate about any particular part of Cornwall, and my hope is that we can have a discussion about principles today as much as possible. So those three things, I'm not going to take them in that order. So first, just to mention the pandemic. There's been a lot of words written and words said about this already so far, and this is by no means the end of that. But I do just want to say the impact of this on the council and the officers who've been doing this review has been very significant. We've heard a lot, I think, about the council's amazing response to this pandemic, which I've been very proud of as an officer of the council. And we hear a lot of talk about those frontline workers and what they are called upon to do. And this project is really run by lots of people who are normally quite behind the scenes: democratic services, electoral services, project managers, people doing member support, localism, that kind of thing. But they've still very much impacted, and I thought members might be interested to hear some of the things that those people have been doing over the last few months have included registering deaths, supporting emergency response decision-making groups, helping support the shielding programme, coordinating local volunteers, and some were even trained to work in the emergency morgue, which thankfully we haven't needed to do yet. So on top of that, we've changed the way we work. So all those officers who would normally have been involved in this process have been working on how to reshape the annual canvas, implementing online meetings, supporting members virtually, and everyone's still working at home, as am I. And if you can hear my little one-year-old in the background, it's because he's throwing a little tantrum as we speak, I think. So apologies about that. So I'm not trying to labour the point, but just to say it's been quite amazing to see what we've all done in the last little while, and unfortunately, as a result of all this, and as a result of not being able to hold committee meetings for a while the government arranged itself to change the legislation and we put in place the technology to allow it, the review was paused. So very early on in the kind of outbreak, we paused this process. So the meeting that we're holding right now was intended to be held at the very beginning of April to report on phase 3 and plan the next steps. And I thought it might be helpful actually to just quickly share on my screen. So bear with me while I do this. Slightly nerve-wracking to do this live in a session. There we go. Have I shared the right thing? Yes, I think I have. So this is the indicative timescale. It'd be helpful if someone could tell me whether they can see this on the screen. You can see.
Yes, it's there.
Excellent, thank you. You can see the website I'm on at the top there, cornwall.gov.uk/governance review. And this was the most recent. So we've adjusted this timetable a few times as the progress of the project has proceeded. But this was what's most recently published, and you can see, I think, quite dramatically where we hoped to be by this point without the impact of a pandemic, and where in fact we now are, where we find ourselves. So we find ourselves trying to condense stage 4 and the final recommendations piece into what was allowed for just the space to make the order and process the final bits and pieces. So we've got quite a challenge on to get to that point. Now let me just unshare that. You can find it at that web address, as I said. So we've lost a solid 3 months out of what was a pretty tight sort of 6 month schedule. So stage 3, sections 3 and 4 of the report set out what was done. I'm going to take that as read, but what does need saying is a thank you to everyone, in particular from parish councils and other interested groups who responded to that. We had a really positive response, and while we haven't yet had time in kind of coming out of the initial phases of this kind of pandemic response to do a qualitative analysis of all of the written and verbal responses that we've had, what we've done so far is collate them, record them, make sure they're filed accurately, and start to characterise whether they are in support or against and those kinds of things without going into the detail of them. So what that means is that while we understand a bit about how many responses and kind of what that tells us about the overall character of the consultation responses, we're not yet in a position to talk about what this means for any individual areas of Cornwall. A huge amount of work went into that, and particularly the public events that were held. Really grateful to all of those people who came along and shared their perspectives and their views at those sessions. I know that members who were there found them very valuable, and so did officers. So we are able to give a bit more detail on some of the data that's presented there, and if members want to ask questions on that, Andrew Harry, who's been doing some of that analysis, is present to answer. But I'm not going to go into more detail on that right now, partly for time. So the next thing to talk about is, so we've covered the pandemic and we've talked a bit about stage 3. The next is about the issue of how to proceed, which is, I think, going to be the substance of today's discussion. The rest of section 6, so after section 6.5, I think, goes on to sort of just give a little discussion of some of the issues around this. And section 6.12 is where you'll find the recommendations that officers have put forward. But and so the things I wanted to say to kind of frame this discussion before I hand over to Stephen Taylor, who's going to do a little bit more on the detail of some of the kind of considerations around those recommendations. So this meeting really represents an attempt by officers to figure out how we restart this project, what that needs to look like, getting resources in place to do it, and understanding the appetite from members as we do that. We've got a clear steer from the chair and vice chairman that they would like to see as much delivered as possible, and I can say very easily that that's the same position that officers hold. That we all put a lot of effort and time into this, and we're all committed to the benefits it's supposed to achieve. So it would be a real shame to say, unfortunately, that the pandemic had cleared it from our ability to deliver before 2021. So we'd like to get to that point, but there are many factors we're trying to now consider, not least of which is that we're still inside a pandemic, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what happens next in a few different ways. I'll come back to that later. So other factors that we're considering are that we've got obviously elections coming up, and it's really key that members know about what and prospective councillors know what boundaries they're dealing with in order to seek for election. We need to think about the finances of anyone who might be at a parish council that would be changing its boundaries or changing details, and they need to be able to set a precept at an appropriate time and plan for their financial arrangements. And given the uncertain times we're in, that might be more important even than usual. And speaking as a personal point, being responsible for the delivery of elections as I am, we've got some major polls in 2021, and we've got a lot of change going into that already, and the changes that would come out of this process need to be able to be fed into our systems early enough to be able to create polling districts and all the arrangements we need in time to have that as a risk-free poll. So there's a lot on our minds as considerations, but like I say, we're all keen to see results from the work we've done so far. I think probably we can expect that that there'll be a split of views on this. I'm really interested to hear what members have to say. Of course, those who feel like the change that might be coming is something they'd like to see happen will be keen to see us press on, and those who are not pleased with what seemed to be in our recommendations might be asking us to defer. But I hope today we can be talking more at the level of principles, as I said before. And I think what's important today, I would commend the committee, to be thinking particularly about those principles and those risks as far as possible, rather than individual local areas, which is kind of the detail we'll have to work through in due course. So I'm coming to a close. I would characterise this report as optimistic, because that's always the best way to operate where possible. But the impact of pandemic is really difficult to predict. If any of us could, we would do that. Certainly, if any of us individuals are impacted, or a close relative is, that's going to have a direct impact on our capacity. But our first deal here is to make sure that we've got capacity to deliver whatever it is that we're being steered towards. My steer from officer perspective is that we need a way forward that keeps the scale of change manageable. And there are various ways to skin that cat. So we presented a couple of options amongst those options in front of you, which are to do with trying to sort of manage the scale of what we're trying to achieve before 2021 so that we can deliver something that is achievable. But members may have views about how we define what would be in and out of that process. The simplest is to defer it all. That takes the risk and political issues off the table, but it would disappoint many people. So we need to be careful about what approach we take. It'd be interesting to hear whether anyone present wants to see that happen. So I'm going to hand over next to Stephen Taylor, who's going to go through a little bit more detail about those recommendations, and in particular try and tease apart the difference between options is it 2 and 3, which are to do with how we might proceed with some but not all of the of what we've heard so far. Lastly, before I do, is to say I'm not intending today to make a firm decision or to ask you to make a firm decision about what will and won't be covered. We're looking, as the report says, for a steer, and we intend to take that away in a very short space of time and come back to you to be able to confirm what is practical and pragmatic, and we'll have to keep that under review as we go along. Okay, so I'll hand over to Stephen Taylor, who is a lawyer who has been advising us on the process of this as we go through and helping to lead the activity. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Alex, and good morning, members. Nice to see some familiar faces back, as well as new members on the panel as well. Just quickly adding to the context that Alex has said, the report at paragraph 1.3 sets out the context of the numbers involved. So of the 213 parishes, 164 parishes have had no boundary change being proposed by Cornwall Council, and the recommendations for change in essence relate to 59 boundary change proposals across 49 parishes. Moving on through all the details of the consultations and public meetings which took place throughout February and March, which I hope members found comprehensive. The report goes then on to paragraph 6, where 7 of the 19 community network areas, which comprise 70 parishes, no objection to the changes proposed in the public consultation document have been received in relation to those 7 CNAs. So that's 12 CNAs where there are changes which are being proposed, where there have been objections made at some point. Moving on, as Alex has said, the paragraph 7.1 of the report does set out the indicative timetable that we previously agreed, and we were hoping to be in the position where we had final recommendations to submit to council by the end of June, having also discussed any changes that the Local Government Boundary Commission needed to approve, with a view to having an extraordinary council meeting in July. So we are well behind timetable. Does that matter? I'm afraid it does, simply because once council actually has made the decision as to what changes or not changes to make, a reorganisation order then needs to be made, and the reorganisation order needs to be made in order to enable the implementation in time for the May elections next year. And as Alex has said, there are various implications, particularly, for example, if new parishes are set up, there will need to be shadow boards set up in order to draft budgets, in order to make a precept submission to the council in February. So the reorganisation order needs to be made with that time scale in mind, which is why it's actually quite important what members decide to do in relation to the way forward and the resources that are then made available by the council in order that can be done. Paragraph 6.12 sets out 4 options which we have identified, and obviously there can be variations on those options. We can have a number of different options, but in essence, option 1 is saying that the whole thing is deferred, as Alex has said. Option 4 says go through it full steam ahead. Consider everything in detail in order to deal with all of the 213 parishes, even where there isn't objection, even where there is an objection, and council will need to have a substantial amount of information in order to do that justice. Options 2 and 3 are really where probably the discussion will focus. Option 2 is to aim to make an order. I think September is ambitious now. It probably would be October, November, because of the detail that will be needed in the order. But just make an order for those parishes where the council has decided to make the changes, and defer ones where, for example, they are very controversial. And what option 2 in the paper says is that where there is agreement between local parish councils, where the approach has the support, and this approach has the support of CALC, the Cornwall Association of Local Councils, which is the controversial one, just be deferred, and we just go ahead with the with where there is agreement between the respective parishes, in essence. The issue that members will have to decide on that, if it's deferred, is that how long will it be deferred to? That will be obviously a matter really for the incoming council after May 21. They will then have to decide how much of the previous consultation to rerun, and there will be no doubt a lengthy discussion about that. But the important thing is that the actual review would not be closed. So it will be a partial review in effect. Option 3 is a variation on that, which is that the changes which are agreed between the various councils and stakeholders are put into the order, and the council says that it's happy to make those. Where there are not, where there is not agreement, then what an approach could be would be that unless there's some particularly overwhelming reasons why one party's submission should be preferred to another, the idea then is that there should be no change. And the importance of that is that the order would then deal with the review. It would have finalised the review, and the justification for making no change is that if there's no overwhelming argument, there's still discussion between adjoining parishes or residents, that there has not been the argument for change hasn't been made out in terms of being reflective of the identities and interests of the community in that area, or be effective and convenient, which is the statutory test that the council has to apply under the 1989 Act. And as I said, that's the major benefit of drawing a line. That wouldn't be it, of course, because in moving it forward from there, knowing that there was local pressure, the council could say we will review that in 2 years' time, during which time then the proponents of change could gather further evidence that they can put forward as to changes in the number of houses in the area, changes in the circumstances, the public view of it all. So there would actually be a way forward, and then the council would treat those as mini reviews if the proponent for change still wish to press their case. So those are the main options, and members' views really are sought as to how they wish to proceed on that. The important point is that whichever route the members wish to go down, the council has to be able to resource it. And Malcolm referred to a particular individual who is no longer working with the CGR team, but would be needed to be brought back in order to have a realistic chance of actually making the order in time for implementation by May 21. So hopefully that's an overview, a broad overview, and happy to answer any questions that members may wish to make. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Both. Sorry, is that me? No. Thank you very much, both officers, for your comments. I'm now inviting questions first from members of the panel, and I do mean questions, not speeches. If anybody wants to ask a question, could they raise their hand, please, and I will ask them. Starting with Councillor Mike Thomas.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. And thank you, Alex and Stephen, for going very clearly through the options that we have, which, as a member who's been here since the beginning, and I think I'm in the minority now of people here from day one, apart from the chair and vice chair, I obviously feel a need to carry on in a big way. In the sense that we are now in July, but in April, my question is, would we really have got to July based on the data in front of me? There seems an awful lot of areas where there was some concern. So my first question is, assuming you had a meeting in May and June, would that have actually given us enough time to go through that particular schedule that you showed us at 7.1? And my second question really is to Stephen. I think it was certainly Malcolm in many of his talks at the beginning of the consultation stages indicated that there was a potential for a legal challenge by any of the parishes that felt aggrieved. Would that, in a sense of, well, obviously the answer would be yes, that would slow the thing down completely as well. Could it in fact stop the whole process if there was a legal challenge in one particular area? Thank you. So two basic questions, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephen, could you take the second question, and whichever of you wants to the first?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. As far as the legal challenge is concerned, that's an interesting one. Certainly, I've had legal challenge, an unsuccessful legal challenge, I have to say, against a previous committee governance review, which I did. And what we argued was that it only affected that particular parish, and the adjoining parish, obviously, and so those elements were treated separately. But the important thing was that we managed to get the legal challenge out of the way before the finalisation of the order. So, so the challenge would be against the decision of the council rather than the order itself. So I would not envisage that any legal challenge would delay the order, unless, of course, it was successful. So far as the first issue is concerned, would we have achieved the original, the amended indicative timetable? I think yes. I think it would have been ambitious, but then it was quite ambitious to do the previous indicative timetable, and we managed to achieve it, I think, with about a week's delay before we envisaged going to the Extraordinary Council in December. So I think we would have done. And the reason for that is that we are consulting on the consultation draft. We are not starting from scratch, which we had to do in stages 1 and 2. So therefore, what we have asked everybody to do is to actually comment on the draft, and we wouldn't. Obviously, the previous arguments would no doubt be put forward. But unless there's new substantive arguments, the council has already had a view on what the merits of the particular proposals are. So therefore, I am thinking that unless something extraordinary has happened, and as Malcolm has said earlier in his introduction, we haven't yet managed to go through all the submissions to do a qualitative analysis. We're just looking at numbers at the moment to get a view. But what we are looking for, and what the panel will be looking for, is what substantive arguments are there being put forward in order to change the panel's recommendations, which should therefore be able to be manageable.
If I may just finally ask, would there have been a time or a slippage time, because obviously July would have had a lot of issues attached to it as well. Would there have been slippage to take us through till October? So I seem to recall Malcolm indicating that we had to decide by December. Full council had to make it a reorganisation, or reorganisation had to take place from December onwards. So is December this year an absolute final date if we were to go forward?
Well, I have actually made an order in January and February to be applied by May, but I don't want to give any false comfort to you. The people that have lost out on that have been the parishes, because up until the time the order is made, they are working on the assumption that the order will reflect what the council has agreed. And when you're talking about the formation of new parishes, of which there is a recommendation, I think, for 2 of them, they need to set up the structure, and it will all be on trust. Now, there's no reason why it can't be done, and it has been done in the past elsewhere, as I have knowledge of. But the important point is that it is entirely on trust at that point. There is no particular order. So we can get things moving on the assumption that a decision will be made and that an order will be made in time to allow that. But the actual mechanics of it, the preparation of the plans and the maps of the new boundaries, the preparation of the electoral information, the consultation with the Local Government Boundary Commission for England, it does place an impossible strain on people and relies on things going right rather than things going wrong, which is why we are saying that, okay, September really was a very realistic time. I have looked at if members are of the mind to go forward. I have looked at what project planning would be needed in order to bring it, say, within a decision being made in September time for the audit made after that, and it is possible as long as things go right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Kenny. While she's speaking, I'm going to ask, can any member of the panel who wishes to ask a question put their hand up, or I will move on to councillors not on the panel. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling a bit between the differences of option 2 and option 3. If I just say what I understand they're saying, you can tell me if I got it wrong. In both 2 and 3, we would attempt to put through the uncontentious stuff, change of parishes, slight changes that everybody agrees with. Both of those we would attempt to do before the next election. The other main difference, as I've got it right, is one would say we would start the process, number 3 is saying start the process completely again in 2 years' time, so 2023, whereas option 2 is saying we could start the process, we could continue the process after the elections.
Yes.
I don't know if that means we can do any work in the meantime. My doubts about that one is that we could have a complete change of both in the parishes and in the council, a complete change of people. But I don't like the idea of leaving it for a whole 2 years in option 3. So, is that basically the difference between them? One of them is saying you can start up again right after the election, and the other one is saying, well, you're going to have to wait 2 years and start again from scratch.
Through you, Chairman, yes, that's right. From scratch in particular areas, yes, but that is quite right. And as you quite rightly identify, Councillor Kenny, there will be changes in personnel and involvement of people in the meantime, and it depends upon really, putting it very simply, whether members want to start off with a clean sheet of paper or not.
May I just add to that, in terms of the timescales of how soon we will be able to move things forward after an election, I wouldn't want to give the impression that if it was a case of deferral, it would be able to start again on day 1 of a new council, whereas if it was a case of stopping and starting again, it would take a lot longer. I think you would need to factor in that a new council and a new panel might take some time to form and have its own views about how it would want to conduct the process and so on. So I would imagine there would still be a significant hiatus while campaigning leading up to the election took place and then following the election.
Yes, I'm just a bit worried about saying it's going to take 2 years before we can start again, but that's, I would guess, is part of the debate. The one other variable that nobody seems to mention in this report is where the panel made a recommendation and the council, for reasons best known for itself, actually changed the recommendation. So I think there's a difference there. But again, I think that's incredibly complex, and there's no way we could do that before the next election.
I think those are comments and not questions. I want to move on to the 3 councillors who put their hands up who are not panel members, Councillor Jenkin, Councillor Long and Councillor Edgerton. First of all, Councillor Jenkin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Thomas from Helston North actually raised partly the same question that I was going to raise, which was about the impact on item 4 of a judicial review from various parish councillors. Interestingly, as this is one of the areas where there is a threat of a judicial review, so therefore that's been answered in part, I think. My concern was, would that impact the whole process if the decision had to be made by September, December, in order to get the order through? I mean, I don't think the council can manage with an order coming through or parishes can't manage with an order coming through in January or February and setting their budgets and everything. I think that would be unreasonable. But in terms of the process, judicial review of the process, that would surely have an impact on the whole review, because if somebody is, or a parish council is putting in a judicial review of the process, then that process equally impacts on all parts of the process, doesn't it?
Through you, Chairman, it depends upon what the grounds of the application for the judicial review are. Obviously, if there is some query as to adequate consultation, the issue is whether it's adequate consultation for everybody or whether it's just adequate consultation on your particular area, Councillor Jenkin. And I would hope that it would be limited to a specific, which we could then deal with separately.
But suppose it was a collection of parishes who came together to judicially review the process, that would surely undermine the entire thing, including the bits where there has been agreement.
I think we'd have to carefully look at it and see whether or not those parishes where there has been agreement and they want it to go ahead, whether the panel then would say, okay, well, we'll go ahead with those because everybody agrees on that, affected by it, and take a rain check on the application of a specific judicial review challenge. And see, I can't go into detail because I don't know what the particular problem is and what the particular point of challenge is, because the general process is very standardized and it's difficult to envisage something that isn't specific, because we followed the general process set out.
I think it's lack of local consultation across a number of areas.
I think your point has been made and answered, Councillor Jenkin. You can make comments later. I'm going to move on to Councillor Long.
Thank you very much. I suppose for us in my division, the parish town council that I represent on Cornwall Council as well, there's been no disagreement and no argument. What quantity of proposals sit in that bracket? So I suppose the question is, if we look at item 2, the proposal 2, to make an order in September, how many of the proposals would fit into that first bit of that, and how many would need to be looked at post May 2021, as opposed to I suppose item 3, which is to restart again, which I don't really like. But 4 would be to carry on and do them all. What I don't want to do is are we going to have a situation where if you try to be too protective of those areas in dispute, you lose all of the impetus for all of the areas, many of which have had really simple proposals which have no opposition? Thank you.
Well, as I said in the introduction through you, Chairman, to Councillor Long, the statistics that we've actually had in terms of numbers are that of the 19 community network areas, 7 community network areas, there are no objection to the change proposed. That's 70 parishes, and they're listed in paragraph 6.1 of the report. So far as the table is in 6.4 concerned, that summarises the position in relation to the 59 draft recommendation for boundary changes to 49 of the 213 parishes in Cornwall. So obviously we would have to concentrate on those. Now, these are the statistics that we've got today. We haven't done any qualitative analysis and cross-checked whether, the extent to agreement or the extent to disagreement, and that work would have to be done before we could be fairly definitive. But as I said to Councillor Jenkins, even if there's a dispute in relation to 1 or 2 of the parishes, and I'm not denigrating the importance of that, but if only a handful of parishes are arguing that they have been disadvantaged in some way by the consultation, that shouldn't stop the other 150 parishes being, or 164 parishes being having their proposals agreed by the council.
So we
have to manage that.
Yeah. So could we? So what is effectively you're saying? Also, almost like a two-tier, 2 orders, really, effectively, without being, maybe not technically, but the spirit of it is effectively 2 orders: a non-controversial order, which involves hopefully my parish and several others, and then you can because that's going to be relatively quick, I would imagine, as opposed to the ones that have some form of pushback, whether it's whatever the reasons, would be almost like dealt with on a separate case. So are you saying that it's just whether that is done post 2021 for those ones that have a problem, or restart everything again?
In essence, you're right. Yes, it would be a 2-stage in reality. The trouble is you have to go through all 213 parishes to be able to do that, which is where the time is being taken. It's not just as simple as right. Well, on Tuesday we'll just take out the uncontroversial ones and make the order on Wednesday. It's not quite as easy as that for obvious reasons. But it's as said to Councillor Kenny and Councillor Jenkins earlier, and has been said by Alex, the important point is, do you want to start off in effect with having made an order for everybody so that everybody knows where they stand, and then those that want to where there's been no change because of controversial matters and there hasn't simply been the time to evaluate the comparative cases being put forward, do you want those to simply have no change because there's not been an overwhelming case demonstrated or whatever, and therefore there'll be no change order made for those cases, and therefore at some point in the future the ball will start rolling again for those if the parishes still want to put forward, as opposed to just simply say, okay, well, where there's controversy, we're not going to do anything, we're going to just say, okay, we'll defer those until some point in the future. But the key point is you haven't then finished the review, so you've got to carry on the process.
Yeah, okay.
Probably rerun counts at the stages 3, I would imagine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Edgerton, and then it will be Councillor Harvey, who will be the last question. Councillor Edgerton.
Yeah, thank you, Malcolm. Mine's a comment rather than a question, so if you want to leave me to later, that's fine.
If you make it brief, I'll take it now.
Right. Okay, my comment is, is related to parochial issues in my area, where I've got a couple of boundary changes which are non-controversial, where they've been agreed by the parishes, and I'm really keen that we get on and do them. And so, I would suggest you go for option 2. It's up to you as a committee, obviously, but I think it'd be a great shame if things which, parishes are happy to do are deferred because other things are more, controversial elsewhere. So I would say half a cake is better than no cake at all. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey, how much of a cake do you want?
Not that much. The judicial review was brought up at Newquay, and the parish councillor that brought it up off his own back. He didn't have the backing of the parish council at all. And how many of the boundary changes are controversial and that? Schubert has done quite a bit of work. They've got a petition and everything. They've done a lot of work on this. It would be a pity if all that was lost. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's very similar to previous questions, but perhaps officers can add to what they've said before.
I don't know whether Alex wants to add anything, but the table in paragraph 6.4 of the report, we know that there are 9 changes which have been agreed between parishes involved, and we know that there are 23 which have not been agreed, and we don't know about 27. Now that may have changed with some conversation with parish clerks, but in essence, half. It seems to be that half appear to be fairly controversial of the changes being proposed to the 49 parishes.
Chairman, if I may add just a quick comment then. Somewhat in answer to Councillor Harvey's question, but also picking up on, I guess, a theme across a few of these questions. I am picking up, as we did imagine that we might, an interest in keeping things moving where there is a sense of local momentum and the community are in agreement, and it would just seem logical and productive to try and land those things where it seems like we're so close, and especially where they are simple, the change that's required, reasonably simple, and therefore not too much kind of administrative change needs to then happen. But in other areas, such as Newquay, there is a level of complexity, and obviously you're describing perhaps some disagreement within individual parishes and so on, and we would need to look very closely at what is achievable in certain areas where things are more complex or where there is less local agreement, because it would simply take a lot longer to make sure we're doing what we would want to do to engage parishes and work our way through any issues. So that illustrates really well why we have options 2 and 3 in this report, which seek to kind of move on what it is reasonably simple and achievable, we hope, to land, but to find a way to draw a ring around that and only do what seems achievable. I hope there is no longer any uncertainty about the difference between option 2 and 3. You've heard it put in a few different ways, but members are still asking. So I think the simplest way to put it is that you can draw a line by saying, for those areas that we don't attempt to tackle before 2021, we either say, that's it, we are going to make an order which specifies that for those areas no change is made. This process then finishes, and then the council or those parishes in due course can then seek to rejoin a process about any particular local area that wants to rejoin a process. The parish can petition the council, and then we're obliged to do it, or they can also request, and we can also instigate. So it's a case of sort of some members might find it appealing to say at least we've drawn a line under this process during this council, and then it can be picked up on an area by area. The other option leaves the whole process open.
Thank you, Alex. That was a good attempt to lead the panel as opposed to giving options. Very last word is from Councillor Fairman.
Hi, thank you, Chair. So tell me if it's right, or appropriate or not. So my thing is more of a speech and less of a question. But Alex did say it would be useful for members to perhaps dive into some of the local case studies to see. The issue in my area is has agreement but is complex. So are you happy for me to proceed on that basis?
Could I just interrupt a minute? I'm going to, when we get on to the first round of discussion, I'm going to take panel members first before non-panel members. So if you can explain your case very briefly, that would help, I think. And but bear in mind, I think many members are familiar with the Delabole St Teth issue because they've heard it many times and I think are sympathetic. So you probably just need to give highlights today.
Okay, point taken. So I just really want to briefly address the points. This is about complexity, really, that are in paragraph 6.7 and 6.8, which are on page 9 of the report, which outline the potential barriers to concluding such a review in time for the May elections. So we're obviously looking at a review to make Delabole a standalone parish. The current, so I'll go through just a few of the brief points. When it comes to the viability of the parish council, the existing parish council in St Teth has 12 members, 4 from the ward of St Teth and 8 from Delabole. And they have recommended that any new Delabole parish council would have 9 members, and with St Teth having 7. So you can see from the numbers there is little risk of either parish council not being viable due to a lack of residents coming forward. And I've already had quite a bit of renewed interest from people who would like to serve for the first time in the light of the opportunities that a governance review would afford each village. But when it comes to finances, the existing parish council at St Teth has built up a very large reserve fund over time, which if divided pro rata would leave both new parish councils with ample leeway to cover any unforeseen expenses. And if each new parish was to set a similar precept to last year, this would allow both councils time to understand their expenses before the need to set real bespoke rates for 2022. The only shared asset is the Delabole Cemetery. Both villages have churchyards, and the St Teth Church also has a large cemetery of its own. The boundary follows the existing ward line, except for a short section across open country, which at the recommendation of this committee was reviewed and then subsequently approved by the parish council. And then finally, both villages have shops, pubs, churches, schools, public toilets, playgrounds and sports fields, and the residents of neither parish would be disadvantaged or deprived of access to facilities should the review go ahead. So I hope that addresses all the potential barriers to getting things done in time for May 2021, even though the St Teth Delabole one is a complex area. And on the basis of that, I urge committee members to go for options 2 or 3, please.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I think Councillor Fairman, you slightly abused what I gave you the opportunity to do. No, seriously, because I do not want long, detailed expositions of individual parishes. Otherwise, we will run out of time. You know, we do need to keep to principles and brief examples of individual parishes. If anyone else tries that in similar way, I will stop them.
My apologies.
No, it's all right. No, I'm only saying that because I just want to be quite clear. We don't get bogged down, especially in areas where I don't think there is particular controversy. I think you're knocking at an open door, and the only reason people are going to stop you is if you bang on about it too much. Next is Councillor Moorcroft. A question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was speaking with a parish chair yesterday, and due to the COVID pandemic, I understand that if a parish councillor can't attend any of the meetings within a 6-month period, they have to be co-opted back on. Please correct me if I'm wrong. If that's the case, one of the parish councils could lose, say, 3 or 4 members because they haven't got a computer, they can't do the virtual meetings. Is that something that's going to have an impact on us and this, what we're looking at? Or, to be fair, is that their problem and not ours?
I will ask Stephen to give a slightly more legalistic answer, but I think the answer is A, it is their responsibility, and B, I don't think it can affect further work on the review, but I'll let Stephen be more judicious.
Difficult to be more judicious than saying it's their problem, not ours. The difficulty that we would need to address, though, is obviously that if there is a problem with a parish council becoming inquorate, then it will be up to this council to appoint somebody to it in order for it to become quorate and then make a decision. But at the moment, because we got to the stage where the consultation has finished and therefore we have had comments from parishes that are going to make comments, I don't envisage that will halt the process at all. So if that helps, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna, question, please.
Chairman, thank you for allowing me to speak. My question, I guess, is did you get and has it been circulated Councillor Fonk's email from yesterday?
The answer is yes, and I will make reference to it later.
Excellent. And my only observation then under those circumstances is I'm not going to bang on about Penzance. You'd be delighted to know. But if were I to be voting, my preference would be option 2, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, Councillor Jenkin, for the second time, very briefly.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, my concern is that councillors are going to discuss this without really understanding where the contentious issues are. Because if you read through the paperwork, there's nothing which really highlights what the particular contentious issues are. And as you will know, between Wendron and Helston, there is a particularly contentious issue, but it may not be apparent to members of the public watching or to members of the panel because there's nothing in the documentation that highlights that.
What's your question?
Obviously, my question is, at what point is there going to be recorded in the documentation any of the particularly contentious issues, because they don't seem to be there in public anywhere?
Well, the answer is quite simply that will depend on what the outcome of the decision today is as regards which option we go for. But I will let officers add to that. But I do have to say, I think your criticism is unfair. Most members of the panel have been on it for the whole of the 3 and a bit years of this council, and they are well aware of the issues. And I'm not bringing you back on that. Can I ask officers to reply to your question?
Simply, the qualitative analysis will pick up areas of dispute, and Wendron is obviously one of those areas, and therefore the panel will then have the choice, depending on which option it wants to go forward with. The panel will then have the choice of whether to go with the recommended scheme of council for consultation, or indeed whether to change it, as no doubt is wanted by Councillor Jenkin. But that's a member decision. But the qualitative analysis will reveal, though, provided that the responses to the consultation do refer to that.
Thank you. Right. That is the end of questions to officers. And you won't hear from officers again for a bit, because after 1 or 2 things, I'm going to do a first round, first of the panel and then other councillors present about what they want to happen. But first, Sarah had her hand up. Well, I was in any way going to invite Sarah to comment now, and she will get a second opportunity later in the meeting. There is a reference in paragraph 6.13 of the report to the resolution that the Calc Board has passed, which is highly relevant to us today. And Sarah, this is your opportunity to expand on that as you wish.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome this opportunity. I think that at the point at which the board was asked for a view, it wasn't clear as the difference between options 2 or 3, and the options weren't actually written down and described. So the Calc Board's view is the recommendation that the work that has been undertaken and where there's no change or where change has been agreed should be set in an order, and that those areas which still need further work or where there is disagreement should be left to a future review in the new authority. Parishes have been heavily battered by the impact of the COVID-19, the disruption to their meetings, their services, and their ability to work and predict the future financially. And they've got a lot of uncertainty coming up with the elections next year, the reduction in the number of Cornwall councillors, their budget setting, Cornwall Council's budget setting, and the financial impact and any potential for a spike. And what they desperately need at the moment is for those bits which are within the control of somebody to give them some certainty, to get that certainty back. For most of the larger councils that I have spoken to, and this is anecdotal, what they are looking for is continuity, and that the community governance review has taken a bit of a back seat in terms of its priorities whilst they're dealing and managing with the COVID-19 response. I'm sure that's not true in terms of hearts and minds, but I'm sure it's true in terms of business continuity. And the urge from the board is to give the parishes some clarity, and where you can agree those parts which are not contested and where they are actually supported by the community, that they should go through. Whether that's option 2 or 3, I don't think the board had a view because it wasn't aware of the nuances of a third or an alternative option, but they certainly support something which gives clarity to those where there's agreement and allows for the new authority to get their heads around any future changes in the post-2021. I think those where there is disagreement will use the petition option if as and when the time comes round, and they may well be grateful for the opportunity to use the additional data which wasn't necessarily in place at the current consultation. But thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I said, Sarah, you'll have an opportunity to come back again after members have given their first comments. Could I ask Councillor Jenkin to turn her camera off, please? Now, I'm going to ask the Vice Chair and then myself to make some brief comments, not so much our opinions, but any thoughts on how the debate might usefully be conducted, and then we will take a 5-minute break. Vice Chair, Councillor Cole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Yeah, I think it's fair to say the discussion is already it's kind of focusing in on options 2 and 3 or some sort of amalgam thereof. I think what I need to do today is just to suggest to members some of the things we need to be thinking about at this stage is like, you know, what are we looking to achieve in terms of the time frame? At the moment, none of the councillors, I think, in asking the questions have said too much about the resources and how that goes forward. I think that's possibly because most people have been talking about dealing with the non-controversial ones, which I think, to be fair, would be relatively light on capacity. I think one thing no one's talked about is if we are going to look to address some of the more complex ones where there's a disagreement, we've not really talked about how we would do it in terms of meetings, or whether we would be happy that these things could be done in virtual meetings rather than physical meetings, bearing in mind we're talking about maps. We've also got issues to do with the last consultation was very problematic at the end. So some of the things we were seeking to do, like public meetings in St Minver, never happened. We've actually promised additional consultations in certain areas, further information to be sought. Again, that kind of didn't happen because of the COVID-19 lockdown. And a lot of this is very, very tight, and I think people do need to give thought to that. I think also following on from some of the contributions from members who have a specific view which relates to, in part at least, to the cases that they're either opposing or pushing in their own areas. I think it's clear to most of us involved in this process what is contentious and what isn't, but we're going to have to be clear about that as we debate it today. And I think it is so varied. If I just give as there's 3 Mebby and Kernow councillors here, and there's 3 different scenarios in each of their areas, I think it's worth just mentioning those as examples of how we go forward. Andrew talked about Callington. There, the proposal is just to unward an existing parish council. So that is so simplistic, it's unbelievable. In my area, there's agreement between 2 parishes to change what was in effect 2 households and a building site. Because of the delay, it's no longer 2 households and a building site, it's actually 25 households. So again, the question is there, do we go out and reconsult the people that are now in the houses that weren't there when we started the process? And Councillor Jenkins came up where they're talking about judicial review. So I think that is a simplistic scenario of 3 very, very different examples, where one's simple but might need a bit more work, and one's contentious. And I think we need to get to grips with all of that, to be honest. And I think there's also, we need to give thought to how it feeds back to full council, because if members think about how it happened in the previous full council meeting when we talked about boundary changes, and the most recent full council, which was virtual, where a number of members were declining to vote on motions because they hadn't been debated long enough, and they didn't think enough scrutiny had been given to it. So there's a lot of factors, and I think we should focus on all of those as we're going forward. So hopefully that's helpful to steer the debate a bit, and I'll let it go back to Malcolm.
Yeah, the final thing, I'm going to just add a couple of points, but I'm going to then ask Stephen to come back, because I would like him to give advice as regards whether, from a legal opinion, the previous consultation round was completed. Because I think that is significant. I think I know what he's going to say. The only thing I want to say is I think what members need to take into account is, first of all, the panel members, the commitment that you're prepared to make during the next couple of months. Because, if you like, the more areas we continue considering, and the more different arguments about any of those there are, the more meetings there will have to be, probably during August. That isn't a reason not to do it, but it's a reason for you to be clear about your commitment, or whether other members can substitute for you to make that commitment. I think the other thing that you need to think about, perhaps, and it's not an argument I'm just putting here something to think about. I think you do need to think a bit about some of the issues. There are clearly 2 totally opposed positions from different parishes or different groups. What more information do we need to make a decision? You know, what is it better to press on and make a decision, or say to the new council, start again and go through it all? So is there an argument perhaps that whether parishes would like certainty as well as the clarity, and what are there risks in any parts of Cornwall that if we don't make a decision and the argument rumbles on for another 4 years, are there places that we think of where that might be damaging? I'm just asking the questions. I'm not expressing a view at this stage, because one thing I did say to the Vice Chair, I think we've given a pretty strong lead and done quite a lot of work during the review so far. But I think we both feel that today we want the other 8 panel members and the other members who've attended today to give an input before we start to pull it all together. So can I ask Stephen just to comment about this point about whether the consultation was completed and whether that in itself is open to challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In my view, the consultation has been completed. The report sets out in paragraphs 3 and 4 the steps that were taken. Councillor Cole quite rightly refers to where we had hoped to do further discussions and had committed to do further discussions, and they have not been able to take place for reasons that we all know. That to me does not imperil the consultation process, and it may well be, depending upon the option that are put forward as the members wish to proceed with, that we could legitimately say, okay, well, we weren't able to talk to the members before March. That is an outstanding commitment. We will see what we can do from now in, so that they can inform the qualitative analysis that members will need in order to take any decisions. So it may be that we can have our cake and eat it on that one.
Thank you very much. It's now 19 minutes past 11 on my computer. We'll start again at 25 past. So that's a 6-minute break. Okay. Thank you all for your contributions so far.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Do we leave the meeting?
No, just mute and turn off your camera.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said, I strongly suggest everybody to mute their microphones. This is the moment of greatest peril for your reputations. Right, is everybody back?
Hi, Malcolm. Yes, back.
Yeah, Joanna's back.
Yes, Malcolm, I'm back.
Yeah, I'm here. The clerk's in attendance.
Good. We have lots of quantity and quality. Okay, everybody happy to continue?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, first thing I'm going to do, I wrote around to all members yesterday, and I got 10 replies. So I'm just going to, including some members who are here today. So I'm just going to pass on to the rest of you the key points that were made by those councillors who wrote to me, which I promised I would do. Firstly, I'm taking councillors in alphabetical order. Firstly, I had an email from Neil Burden who said, with the lack of public consultation and sharing, I feel to push this through is not best practice and gives the impression of Big Brother bully tactics, etc. For me, I would leave it until it is possible to engage face-to-face with the public in an open forum, as was your original plan. Next was Councillor Edgerton, who is here, and just to clarify, the two areas which I think he's hoping that we will address are the minor boundary change between Grampound and Probus, and the merger of QB with Tregony. The third was Councillor Elliott, who wrote, I would stick with the status quo as far as Long Rock and Rose and Grouse are concerned, but enact the Nancledra change, moving from Ludgvan to Wednack. My view on Penzance is that the financial shock to the town would be compounded by the removal of Haymore and Gulval, although I sympathise with the views of residents in both areas and would certainly like to see Gulval consulted. Overall, I believe we should stick to small-scale tidying up where both councils are in agreement, but put off wholesale changes to 2025, by which time we might see most of the planning sites developed and boundaries needing to be reviewed again. Councillor Fairman wrote, and he has already explained his strong wish that the St Teth Delabole division into two parishes is made. One thing he didn't say, which is maybe important, especially as the vice chair, is that he and the parish council have taken note of Councillor Cole's comment at the last time this was discussed, that the boundary could be improved. Then there was an email from Councillor Fonk, which Councillor McKenna has referred to. Now, this is a long message which has been sent to the whole panel, so I'm not going to read it, but the key point for the benefit of those of you who are not panel members is that he supports option 2, and he thinks that Haymore and Gulval ought to be left until after 2021. Then Councillor Hawkins, who wrote to say, is there any chance that the proposed amalgamation of St Buryan and Paul parishes could take place next year? Is there anything we can do to enable it to do so? Councillor Jenkin wrote to both Councillor Cole and myself, and is putting her arguments today forcefully, as I would have expected. I had 2 emails from Councillor Sue Nicholas, basically putting arguments both to change the Marazion Peranathno boundary and the Peranathno St Hilary boundary. And she argued that that's been put forward for the whole time. Councillor Olivier said that he would completely understand if, because of current circumstances, decisions about Penzance were deferred until after the 2021 elections. And finally, Councillor Williams, who wrote, as that he can't be present because of another commitment. He says he's worked very hard to make sensible recommendations to the committee and received some previous support in some cases, but not others. However, he will accept the committee's recommendations and fully understands the very hard work and time the committee have put in. We're all in difficult times and we have just got to get on with it. And we will now get on with the rest of the meeting. So what I want to do is to invite members of the panel to make first comments. I'm not seeking recommendations at this stage, and I don't want to engage in debate. So I'm only going to give members an opportunity to speak once at this stage. After we've heard from those panel members who want to speak, I will ask any other members of the council who want to speak. But again, I don't want it to go on at too length, and I don't want it to go into too much detail about specific areas, because that doesn't seem necessary for today. But if any panel members who would like to speak, and I hope you all will, because this is an important decision that we've got to make today. If any members of the panel could put their hands up, I will be delighted. And I am especially delighted that Councillors Frost and Kenny are leading the charge. So over to Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I think my only comment at this stage is that, you know, this panel has done an incredible amount of work in this review. And I think, you know, we've danced around complex issues, simple issues, but we all know that very many of these proposals and challenges can be overcome in time. And I think, you know, we were elected to make decisions, and I think we need to make those decisions and crack on with that. I think, you know, we also know which ones that we're not going to be able to achieve by May 2021. I think we're going to know that in the next meeting that we have, and I think we can very easily discern which ones we can take forward and which ones we can't. So I know you said you didn't want any recommendations, but and I won't make any, but 2 or 3 for me, and we should just get on with it.
Sorry. Just to be clear what I meant by no recommendations, I meant no formal recommendations. I do want members to give an indication of what they're thinking, because my assumption is that during this bit of the meeting, officers will be listening closely, seeing and in due course seeing if they can display great wisdom and bring all of our thoughts together into what seems to be the consensus. And that's when I will ask people to consider formal propositions. So you've spoke exactly the way I wanted.
Okay, well, for me, then, I'll just say that if it was down to me, I think I would probably lean towards 3, but I'm happy with 2 or 3.
Okay, next is Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just start by quickly saying that Councillor Harvey referred to Newquay. He didn't mean Newquay itself. He meant the whole area of Newquay. I don't think we have a judicial review coming from the Town Council in Newquay. Yeah, I mean, Newquay's got them all. Newquay's got an accepted change, a change that was rejected by the panel and then turned over by council, and one that is where all-out war is concerned. I prefer option 2. I think we probably will have to go to option 3, because I just can't see how we can impose upon a completely new council the meanderings that we have done this year. I think it's a real shame, and I think we're going to lose a lot of excellent work. But and as I say, I much prefer 2, so we can get on with it straight away. I just don't see how you can do that with a new council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wood, then Councillor Mike Thomas, and then Councillor Bastin. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. As an authority, I feel we need the ability, the assurances and the confidence that we can move forward. But democracy in this case is a very hard taskmaster. Parochial issues are going to impact on the policy that we set. Option 2 enables progress, but it does have quite a lot of risk. Option 3 is safer, but I think, as Councillor Cole said, we could be accused of kicking a can down the road only to find that can is full of worms, and it's going to need a lot of work, and therefore maybe it would be better So I'm looking myself, if you want to steer, Chairman, as a sort of hybrid between 2 and 3 of getting a lot of things in place, but appreciating that some will have to be bound over for a couple of years. Because there are going to be so many changes, and Builder Boris has said, there's going to be a lot more housing be brought to fruition, which could impact a lot. And us having made certain decisions, as Councillor Cole said, have a boundary set within 2 houses, and suddenly they turn around and say, well, all these houses are now occupied, and a lot more work's being done. We could be accused then of creating a situation of having to duplicate work when the first lot hasn't been imposed. So yes, democracy is a hard taskmaster. So I'm looking really at the officers, if they can come forward, almost like a hybrid between 2 and 3 to give us a clear steer forward. That's my position, Chairman. Thank you.
That is very interesting. Thank you very much. Councillor Mike Thomas.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, I didn't come to this meeting predetermined. I felt I wanted to hear the debate, and I am still listening. But I do feel that we need to make some progress, and I certainly don't feel that the option 1 is one that I feel happy to go with. And like Councillor Wood and Councillor Frost, I do feel that we should be able to make some progress within the possible hybrid of those. There's so much work that has been done. My view would be to try to consolidate what we have achieved and be able to pass on to the next council all the areas that we felt couldn't be adequately dealt with. I'll be as brief as that, and I know I won't be able to come back, but I certainly think that I'd like on the spectrum to be much further along than going back.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bastin, your first speech from the front benches.
Thank you, Chair. I must say that just to be momentarily parochial, it would worry me if all the work that's been done between Falmouth and Budok, and now they've come to an agreement, were just lost, would be a real concern. And I must say, I agree with Councillors Wood and Thomas, really, in as much as if we can have a hybrid option, but really we need to consolidate, I think, and this is from past experiences, as you say, a non-venture, all the work that's gone on, it would be a shame just to lose it. So options 2 or 3, or a hybrid perhaps.
Thank you very much. Councillor Formosa.
Thank you. Just following on from other comments, and particularly Councillor Kenny's comments, is it not an option for us to press on at this stage, and then if a subsequent council decides to backtrack or revisit it, then that's a matter for them? I mean, either way, I wouldn't want to prejudge the thoughts of a new council. Is that an option?
Yeah, just a lay comment. We're always told we cannot make decisions for a future council. So I think we have to assume that whoever the individuals on the new council are, we complete a process which is implemented in May next year. So I think that's really the basis of the recommendations, that we have to decide what we're confident to make decisions on, and then everything else, either the review stops or else it is passed on to the next council. I don't know if that's helpful, and if you want to come back, please do. No. Councillor Cole, I don't want to bring you in at this stage, if that's all right.
It's a question actually for the. I'll leave it. I'll leave it.
I think that might be better.
Yeah.
Can I just check? Do any other members of the panel who haven't spoken want to? No. If that's the case, I will move on to other councillors who are present. And again, if anybody else would like to put their hand up. And once again, it's Councillor Jenkin, consistent in leading the charge. Councillor Jenkin.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm bearing in mind I couldn't actually engage with the process last October for personal reasons. I'm quite pleased to be able to jump in now and say things. One of my concerns with option 2 is the uncertainty of the future council and what they're likely to decide, or as you just said, it's difficult to fetter a future council to do something or not do something. So from my point of view, doing something that actually draws a line that can then be restarted by individual areas if needed is probably better for the council. But on the other hand, it would be a shame if all the evidence gathered was lost to a new process, because I know certainly in my area the parish has put quite a lot of effort into undertaking consultations, talking to individual residents, and providing evidence of the wish to stay as one, which initially they were told they didn't need to provide any evidence until Helston Town Council came up with a scheme which then had to bounce them into frantically going out and getting evidence about why the status quo was the best thing. So certainly from Helston and Wendron's point of view, I would feel that this issue is so contentious that actually saying that it should be part of an order staying the same until 2 years' time. The issue for those members who are not aware is that there's a development site where some development has taken place, but there's only about 10 residents there, and Helston are wishing to include that development site in Helston. However, Wendron's view is that at this moment in time it's not appropriate to do that because there aren't residents there to discuss whether they wish to be in Helston or wish to be in Wendron, and therefore 2 years down the line would be a much better time to actually look at that issue. So from Wendron's point of view, drawing a line and saying at this point in time there's no point in making changes is preferable to leaving it hanging. So that's more towards option 3 than option 2, I believe. So I would ask the members to think about the impact on small parishes of having something hanging over them and having to continually revisit and recollate the evidence needed if there's an ongoing process, and that perhaps drawing a line in the sand and allowing a new council, if they wish, to restart the process a couple of years down the line when the development may or may not have been built out, would be a better proposal, certainly for my area. Having said that, I can understand there may be other areas where an easy sort of discussion could enable it to go forward. There is no easy discussion between Helston and Wendron on this issue, and as I mentioned before, Wendron Parish Council are seriously considering that if this goes forward without them having the opportunity to really be listened to, they are looking at the situation of judicial review, because they feel highly aggrieved that they haven't really been listened to in terms of local knowledge. The development boundary on the site is not a physical boundary. There is no natural boundary there which would meet the electoral review criteria, and yet that's what was proposed by the meeting of this panel on the 14th of October and endorsed by full council in December for the consultation draft, with no opportunity for any discussion between the parishes or with the local member on the reality of that boundary on the site. I know that the chair has spoken to Wendron Parish Council since that time as an initial first stab at trying to understand the local issues, but that was just prior to the pandemic and lockdown happening. So therefore there has been no opportunity for the parish to be able to explain in detail, draw up the maps, talk with officers to explain why the current proposals are patently inadequate and unenforceable in terms of defining that boundary. So I would ask members to really understand that there are some really contentious issues in relation to this to that particular site, and that whatever recommendation they come up with eventually does understand that these contentious issues are not things that are going to be solved overnight or even by December. So therefore a draft order that included ignoring the views of the parish in this respect would be something that the parish would be highly aggrieved about, and would be something where certainly local residents and some of the parish are considering whether there's an opportunity for a judicial review on the process. And because of the pandemic, the process has been even more inadequate. I know that can't be helped, but it hasn't been a pleasant process for the parish. There hasn't been the opportunity for one-to-one discussion with the local member, and the local member has not been able to input into the process in the autumn of last year. So there is a certain feeling of unfairness on this issue, where a large town council with lots of resources at its beck and call are riding roughshod over the views of local residents and the local parish. So please take that into account when you're looking at what recommendation to take forward. Thank you.
So I'll just make two brief comments since Councillor Jenkins did refer to me, and I'm making comments without commenting on the issue, but just the process. One, she is fully justified in reminding colleagues that she was out of action during the last round and therefore wasn't able to put her and her parish's point of view. That is a fair observation. Secondly, I did go to meet Wendron Parish Council, a group of them, and they were very clear about their opinions, and I did find that extremely helpful. So I just want to say that. So I'll now move on to Councillors May, Eakins, Smith and Fitter. Councillor May.
Sorry, Chairman, you're breaking up. So did you mean for me to come in now?
Sorry, yes, I do, please. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, it's a shame, really. Lots of speakers are breaking up this morning, and I am probably breaking up as I speak. So we're missing some of the conversation. However, what I wanted to say was thank you first for allowing me to speak. Thank you to the panel for all the input, because you've certainly put in some hours over the past 18 months, 20 months. If I was on the panel, I think I would be pointing in the direction of option 2. But however, I can see that members of the panel are leading to option 2, to option 3, taking a little bit of each. Obviously, Penryn, Falmouth, St Clovis and May, Penryn has got some issues, but I think now is not the time to speak about them, because we did go to consultations that were held in the autumn, but as I've heard this morning, they have not yet been finalised. So with that in mind, what has been decided, I don't think should be held up. I think that should go forward, because a lot of work has gone into that, and it would be a shame for those parishes that have got the nod for it then to be put on hold till 2021-22, which it could happen 21-22 is a long way off for some of us. So without furthermore to say, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm sure you'll do the right thing as you have all the way along. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Eakins Smith.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Sorry I was a little bit late arriving at the meeting, but I have actually heard the majority of the debate. It seems to me that, and following the trend of the argument, and having watched and in some cases participated in the extreme amount of hard work that's been done by the panel, and indeed, one mustn't forget, by all the members of the local parish councils and public that came along to the meetings and participated, I think it would be a great shame, if not wrong, not to actually take those decisions that we can easily take at the moment. Simple for me to say I don't have any issues in my own very specific part of the area, although there are some relatively close. I would have thought that we could have got that done and reward the time, effort, and indeed the number of trees that have been consumed over the last 2 or 3 years. It would be quite a sort of slap in the face in a way to say, well, we're going to have to wait 2 years and start the process effectively all over again, which might not go down too well. So in listening to the debate, I would have thought that option 2, with maybe 1 or 2 tweaks, has been suggested by other councillors, is probably what we should be looking at. That's it, I think, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to speak. It could be that I've missed this, and I see the options on the agenda, but it is the way that we've got a big issue in parishes, but with agreement.
Sorry, could I just interrupt you a minute? I know there have been comments about people not being particularly audible. From my point of view, I'm having more difficulty hearing you than anybody else so far. I'm not sure why is.
That's generally true. None of us can hear it.
Yeah. I don't know what you can do, John, but if you can, we do want to hear you.
Yeah, okay, let me just move to a different location. Perhaps that may help.
Chairman, Reese Opie here, the meeting producer. I can hear everybody very clearly, except for Councillor Fitter then. So I'm not sure if it's issues elsewhere, but I've been able to hear everything very clearly up until this point.
Yeah, would you mind if I just move to a different location? It won't take me more than 20 seconds.
You're better already. That's much better than before.
Yeah.
Is this any better now?
I think it is. Yes.
Yes.
I'll move a bit further to the blasted router business. How about this now? How are we doing now, Mr. Chairman?
That sounds great. Off you go.
Okay, sir. Well, look, I apologise for taking your time, and I may have misunderstood or missed the point, but I do wonder whether your committee has done so much work, and the towns and parishes have also, of course, equally done a lot of work, that where there is agreement over certain issues, but there is a wider issue that still is not resolved, is there any way that your committee can allow the agreement part of the disagreement, if you follow what I'm saying, to be accepted and go through? So in other words, draw those parts of the boundaries where the parish and town have common agreement and leave the contentious issues, which will need to be resolved possibly at another time, set apart. And that was purely my question to you, sir, and for your committee to consider when coming to your resolutions. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Can I just slightly abuse my position as chairman, just to comment, because it is a point that hasn't been made today, but I think it's a valid one. I think there may well be a number of parishes where some of the changes are not controversial, but others are controversial. So it may be possible to implement some of them, but not the others. And I think whatever recommendation we put through, or whatever thought process officers take away from the meeting today, I think Councillor Fitter's point, and he hasn't gone into detail, he's rightly talked about principles, and I think it's a valid one. So I just wanted to say that quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm now pleased to welcome Councillor Nicholas, who I know wasn't able to join us earlier. Could I say to Councillor Nicholas, I did earlier, and I don't know if you joined us by then, I did mention very briefly the two headline points that concern you about your area. But you are very welcome to speak to the panel now.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, sorry, I only came in at about 11:45 because I had another meeting before that. I think what Councillor Fitter has suggested is quite a good idea, really, because I think if there's already agreement on a lot of the boundaries, then it seems, you know, a bit odd to kind of like carry that forward. But we do have, or I do have, on a couple of my parishes, some controversial boundaries, which, quite frankly, if you use a bit of common sense, make sense on the suggestions of the changes. I don't think an argument of it's a historic parish boundary, if we're looking at a boundary review, makes much sense. So it's about common sense and about making it more realistic in terms of how things are being developed, developments in the area, you know, ideas of future development. So I think I would welcome the opportunity for that kind of meeting separate to the ones that have already been decided. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can I just check? I don't see any more members present who are not on the panel but who wish to speak. Councillor Eakin-Smith has still got his hand up, but I think that's a mistake. Councillor Harvey, you can come in next.
Thank you. We would have to have another full council meeting to vote on the contentious ones if we're not careful. I've spoken to my parish council chairman over in the break, and he would like to think you would carry on and do the lot. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not bringing officers in at the moment, but I'm assuming they're noting anything which are really questions as well. My assumption is that whatever we agree today, even if it was just one change, would have to go before council, because I don't think we have delegated powers, but that's something that can be confirmed when officers come back. Now, I think I've heard from all of the
Excuse me, Chair. Councillor Moorcroft has got his hand raised.
I know what I'm doing. I think I have heard now from all of the councillors who are not members of the panel. I am now going to invite Councillor Moorcroft. This isn't what I was going to do, but he didn't speak before. And I will then allow Councillor Mike Thomas to come back briefly, because I'm assuming he wants to respond to the remarks that Councillor Jenkin made. But I will ask him to be brief on that. Councillor Moorcroft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologise. I should have come in earlier, but I was deciding whether or not to ask. I'm leaning towards option 2 of the options. I think we should take what we have, where areas are agreed, and put them to bed, so to speak, so we can concentrate on the others. I agree with Councillor Kenny about the new parish councillors and all coming in next year. However, on the positive side, you might get some new councillors with different point of views, different perspectives, which may push this forward. The issue for me in Wadebridge is, as you know, the neighbourhood plan. The parish councils and the town councils will not agree, will not sit down and debate this until the electoral review is complete, which I know is a long way off. But the longer that goes on, the longer the neighbourhood plan goes on, and we desperately need the neighbourhood plan in Wadebridge. That's all I really wanted to say, and apologies again, I should have come in earlier.
Councillor Moorcroft, again, you have no need to apologise. I was trying to infer something cryptically earlier, and I must admit the Wadebridge area is going through my mind more than any other part of Cornwall on this review, as it has done for quite a long time. So thank you for coming in at this point. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you for letting me come back, Malcolm. Just two quick observations, and I will try and be brief. The town council in Helston, in my opinion, actually didn't do enough, rather than actually overusing their resources. And the due process that went through the meetings, and certainly when I attended in Poole, I felt followed no different to anywhere else. And it has to come to a point, surely, where members make a decision that may not be something that people like. And as Councillor Fitter indicated, there needs to be some way of moving forward. So my concern more generally, which takes me to my second point, is also the integrity of our new committee, because with new members, are we into difficulties in terms of people being trained in the same way? Because we spent many hours at the beginning of this process being trained to actually approach this. Will we make sure that the new members who have joined this committee will have the same understanding the way we approached, so that they can view the decisions that were made in the past by the previous members and understand how they came to reach those decisions? Because, and maybe that's a question to go back to Stephen, because I am concerned that we are laying ourselves open to our validity it might be questioned if it can't be demonstrated we're all approaching this in the same way.
Okay. Sorry. We're very near the end of member comments, and you can get a reply when officers come back in a minute. Can I just check? I think I have called everybody who's asked to speak, with the exception of Councillor Cole, who I was going to come to next anyway. So can you assume I'm not going to call any other member for the moment? I'm going to call Councillor Cole, then I'll sum up, and then I'm going to invite Sarah Mason to speak again, and then officers to try and pull together where we've got to so far. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Malcolm. I've got a query that's come up in my head going through, and it may be one that we need the officers to give a bit of guidance on, depending which option we go for. That was when Councillor Kenny made the comment about Newquay having a number of possible changes to the boundaries. One of, some which are simple and haven't been agreed, others which are very contentious, and the idea that one would go forward, that the simple one would be done but not the contentious one. My question is, when we're talking about a specific parish, whether we do one tweak and then we can come back and do a second review of the same parish, having already done one, or whether we need to treat each parish as a whole, so you don't make either change, or you make both, or if that makes sense, that whether we'd be able to do a small change and then come back and do a more significant change in a second phase, if you like. So I think that needs a little bit of thought. In terms of options 2 and 3, they are very similar. It's just it's with 2, do we in effect do the simple ones, then defer the others and keep working in the new council, or close down the process on the assumption it's going to be reopened? So I don't think there's a lot of difference in those, and it does depend on what happens in the next council. But I would imagine that most political groups would be willing to give an undertaking of whichever one we chose. They would look to follow through in the next council. So that might be something we need to do outside of this meeting, and just give ourselves some reassurance, because I would assume that would go. That would help. I think the other thing I'd just like to say at this point, we're talking about dealing with the simple ones, and if you like, deferring the controversial ones. I think some of the ones where there's agreement, they're not, I won't say complicated is not the right word, but for example at St Teth there is agreement, but there's work to be done, but that's no reason for it not to go forward. At the moment, where I'm to, I think, is if the parish councils are not in agreement, it is therefore complicated, and therefore those get deferred, and given the uncertainties around meetings and processes and resource, it's pretty clear to us then which ones we do get done. So that's pretty much where I'm sat at the moment. Thank you, Malcolm.
I will just have a final word, and it will be a very brief word. During the course of that, can officers think whether they wish a short deferment for themselves to reflect, or if they can follow on? And I'll then call Sarah. I only just wanted to make 2 points. One is just on the parishes, the urban and rural parishes point, just being parochial for a minute about St Austell, I think it's probably fair to say there are 2 boundary changes potentially affecting St Austell which are non-controversial. There is one which is pretty controversial, and there is one which is very controversial. So I would have thought it ought to be possible to implement the 2 easy ones. There's scope for debate about whether you try to consider the slightly controversial one, but you definitely don't consider the very controversial one. The only thing I did say, and Councillor Moorcroft has written to me, and I think may have thought that he hadn't said what I'd wanted him to. He has said what I wanted him to say. As a Wadebridge member, my concern about Wadebridge in particular is if we don't do anything during the life of this council, does that mean that the neighbourhood development plan will stall for a further 4 years? Because if that is the case, I think the implications for the Wadebridge area are very serious. But it is an area where we came to a conclusion before, although there are disagreements between the parishes. So my personal view is that it's too simplistic to say just go for areas where there is agreement between parishes. I think we also need to consider the implications if we don't make changes. You know, as people often say, the implications of inaction are often just as great as the implications of action. So I just sort of say that, and that's all I want to say. Now, I want to invite Sarah Mason. Would you like to say anything further at this stage, having heard the way the debate has gone so far?
Thank you, Chair. I think I would just like to urge members of this committee to ensure that there is some clarity for the parishes and that you come to a decision on how this is going to go forward, and you give those parishes where there is agreement the opportunity to undertake the work to conclude the arrangements to allow them to go for election in May 2021. And for those areas where there is no change, for allow them to get the certainty that life can now move forward with one less thing on their plate. Some of the issues which have come to pass over the period of the COVID-19 affect parishes which have not actually got any options around the governance review at all. So I would urge the panel to stick to the terms of reference and get as much of this review done as possible, deferring those where there is complex issues and further work needed to post the elections of 2021. And I think that's all. Thank you very much, Chair.
Could I thank Sarah very much for your contributions today and indeed the whole way through the review so far, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again before we get to the very final end. Now, can I ask officers, I don't know who is going to comment now, do one or more of you wish to take stock now, or would you prefer to have a break of a few minutes just to clarify your thinking? What would you like to happen next?
Hi, Malcolm. Because we're in the unusual situation of being all in our separate houses and not being able to pass bits of paper or give knowing glances, it would be unhelpful if we could just say, take a few minutes. It's been quite a long meeting so far, so if we could take something like 10 minutes, I wonder if that would be acceptable to you and give everyone a chance to grab a cup of tea or something while we talk. If it
is for everybody else, I'm happy because, okay, the meeting is not going quickly, but it's not going horrendously slowly. So I think is it 12:09 at the moment? If we start again at 12:20, would that be all right?
Great.
Okay. The meeting is now paused. The meeting is now paused until 12:20.
Can I just say to officers, I'll just send a meeting invite round in a second with a link so we can all land in the same place.
Sorry, Malcolm, are we exiting?
You don't need to exit, but I suggest everybody switches their microphones off. But officers will be talking separately from any of us, including the Vice Chairman and me. I haven't started the meeting again because some of the officers are saying on hold, which I assume means that they're not present. So I'm going to wait, certainly for Alex to be here, and then we will get going.
Hello, thank you, Phil. Apologies for 2 minutes over, but we're just all.
I would be a total hypocrite if I criticised anybody for being 2 minutes late for something. Right. Okay. Now, having had the opportunity to reflect, can I just check? Is everybody hearing things loud and clear and back with us again? Especially
Yes,
the panel.
thank you, Malcolm. Yeah.
Yes, I can hear, and it's very clear.
Good.
Yes.
I've heard a few voices, which is encouraging. So, Alex, over to you.
So I'm going to hand to Stephen for who's going to read out what we think is our best synthesis of the position. Ultimately, what it does is tries to draw out that that we're hearing from across the membership that something around option 2, but maybe with a flavour of option 3 and in some form of a hybrid. So I'll hand over to Stephen, who's got some wording, and then we can discuss that a bit further. There were various specific issues raised by members as well, but perhaps if we go straight to the recommendation first, and then we can address some of those individual bits following that.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I was hoping you'd talk a little bit longer. I'm actually writing it down.
Well, have I? Would you like me to pick up a couple of the specifics while you're
Do you want to pick up a couple of the specifics? I'm nearly there.
I could do that. So in terms of areas where there is a mixed bag in a local area, in principle, yes, it is absolutely possible to move some of it forward on the basis that it can be achieved and to not do other parts. It'll absolutely be within the gift of the oh, sorry, I've not got my camera on. It'll be within the gift of the press the button of the panel to decide which of the various recommendations it does or doesn't take forward. So yes, it's possible to do that. What else have we got here from specific questions? In terms of Wadebridge, where they put the neighbourhood plan on hold, I'm aware that's a very complex local issue. Of course, there isn't a technical reason why that has to be on hold while the review takes place. So I thought I'd just mention that. That's their choice about how they want to manage the progress of their business, and I understand some of the reasons why. But just to be clear, that the link isn't imposed by Cornwall Council, but nevertheless, it's a very real concern to be aware of the local impacts of the panel's decision making in that area. In terms of training, there's been quite a lot of turnover across the panel across the course of this exercise, and it's an important principle that when we bring forward reports to any meeting of members, all of the information that is needed to support a decision is always included in the report, in the paperwork. The historic discussions and so on by that point will be sufficiently summarised and so on in order to make sure that members are able to make a decision on the basis of what's in front of them. But that doesn't mean that it is irrelevant to make sure that members have the same understanding as others about how the process works and so on. So yes, we could do some work to make sure that the new members on the panel are fully up to speed with the implications of the work we're doing. There were a few comments about that did talk about where there might be capacity and so on, and I do want to emphasise that is still an important consideration, and whatever goes forward, we're going to have to bear in mind that as well as other options. It's not only about whether there is local agreement and so on and so forth. There is also a pragmatic consideration, simply about what is doable. We mustn't lose sight of the fact that we have lost so much time in this review outside of our hands. And the various options that asked for clarity. There's one point as we were deliberating, we did think it was something that's a little bit might be worth teasing out. So various members said how important it would be to have clarity and give clarity to parishes, and then sort of leaned towards option 2. I suppose I should say that in terms of just literally clarity, option 3 is probably slightly clearer, because it says these areas go forward, these areas do not, and if anything wants to change beyond that, if any parishes have further changes they want to make, or the council, then it is a totally separate process further down the line. So you might say that's the clearest, but option 2, as you have discussed today, is similar in that it just puts those areas which don't go forward at this point on further down the line, without yet deciding whether or not they will result in any changes. So we've tried to bear that in mind and come up with a synthesis, as I say. Stephen, have I provided sufficient cover for you to to draft the recommendation up for us.
You have indeed, and I did make a chat. I did give you a hint, so that's fine. Thank you so much. If members are poised, the decision of the panel, which appears to be the consensus that's been reached, is an amalgamation of options 2 and 3. So the recommendation therefore is in 2 parts. The first one is that the panel proceeds to consider and determine uncontroversial proposals in the consultation scheme, or where agreement has been reached between the parishes involved. And the second part then is the panel to review the proposals where agreement has not been reached between the parishes involved and decide whether to defer making a decision for no change, whether to defer or make a decision for no change and retain the status quo. In other words, all the proposal will come before you, but the level of detail will simply be for you to decide whether or not to defer, as option 2 says, or make an actual decision for no change, as option 3 says. And the reason why I do that is the Weybridge example may well be that the parishes would be involved would prefer to actually have a decision for no change at this stage rather than a deferral, bearing in mind that it can always come back to the panel for a decision for it to be re-looked at. Which answers Councillor Cole's point. Yes, you can make a change and then come back and make a further change later.
Stephen, I've written.
Sorry, Alex. Could I come in next?
I have a stunned people. I do apologise.
No, hang on. Stephen, could you read the second bit out again?
Yes.
Because I didn't really catch it, and I couldn't actually relate what you said in that recommendation to what you said afterwards.
Okay, and I will put it in the meeting chat line if you want to debate it further. So the second part is the panel to review the proposals where agreement has not been reached between the parishes involved and decide whether to defer or make a decision for no change and thereby retain the status quo.
Can I ask why you think on that second one those are the only 2 options? Because in effect those seem to me to be saying that this council will not agree anywhere other than where there is agreement. That's how I interpret that, and I don't think that's what most members were saying.
Okay, I misunderstood what members were saying. I thought that members were saying that imposing a solution on parishes that didn't agree was something that they didn't want to do. Well, if people
I'm not trying to express my opinion, but I didn't hear anyone use the word imposing, for example. And I'm not sure that's what. I'm only saying I'm not sure that's what members said.
Okay.
Because to be honest, I don't really see what that adds to the first recommendation. The first recommendation is basically do what's agreed, and that's it. I don't really see what the second lot of words add as regards positive action.
It distinguishes between deferring or making a decision that there be no change. In other words, do you draw a line under it, or do you leave it open for the for it subsequently to be continued? Which is the essential difference between option 2 and 3 anyway. One is a deferral and one is a drawing the line under it and say we will reopen it again in 2 years' time.
Okay, I would like, Alex, you wanted to come back in again.
I was only going to offer to put them up on the screen, which I think I have now done. But of course, this is just what Stephen read out, and I understand you're about to have a debate about it.
Okay, so have officers answered all of the questions that you think you were asked?
Councillor Thomas and Councillor Jenkins had an exchange of views, and Councillor Thomas asked whether I was whether the panel are entitled to be satisfied that all the parishes were treated the same, and I can confirm that as far as I'm aware. And Councillor Cole asked a question about coming back with a further change after a change had been made, and the answer is yes. That's an issue of timetable, really, whether the council can be compelled to by way of petition or whether it's at the council's own volition. Those are the only two questions I had.
Okay. Sophie Hosking has her hand up. I'd like her to contribute next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify a point you were, I think, making just now? Is that would you like? Are you suggesting that there is the ability that you retain the ability to make a decision where there is controversy over a point at the moment? So that, and that may be, well, that in which case that would be against the wishes of or against the thinking of a particular parish. So where there is a controversial decision, you are asking to retain the ability to make a decision rather than make no change or defer.
At the moment, I'm not asking anything as an individual. I'm just trying to clarify what the recommendation means, and I think I've teased that out to my satisfaction. Okay, now look, can I explain that again? I'm going to take members of the panel first, so I think that is the right thing because you're the only people who can make propositions. So I'm going to take members of the panel first and then bring in other councillors following. So it's Councillor Kenny, Councillor Frost and Councillor Thomas. Councillor Kenny first. Councillor Kenny, can you hear us?
I think I pressed all the wrong buttons. Let's try again.
Never mind.
Have I shared the screen? That's my favourite trick. Right, start again. I'm happy with the first recommendation, though I think we need some sort of mechanism to agree what the changes that have been agreed are, because I don't think it's as simple as the officers going through. I think you'll need to involve the members to agree what they have been agreed between the parishes and the towns and the parishes and the parishes. The second one, no, I'm not happy with that because it appears to be saying, I think exactly what Sophie said, you appear to be making a suggestion that we make no change for anything that is difficult, and that is not what we want to do. The difference between, for me, the difference between 2 and 3 is that in 2, you continue the process, albeit possibly with different councillors, and 3 is saying, well, we'll have to do it, we'll have to start again in 2 years' time. I much prefer 2. I think practically speaking, we might have to do 3, but I would be very unhappy is if any of the contentious stuff is absolutely discarded. Oh, we'll decide not to follow it up, and the parish can bring it back if they want to. No, I don't think that's acceptable. I think what we're talking about is accepting what we can and deferring to next year. Or after the election, we're deferring, and we just need to understand whether we can continue with the work we've already done, or whether we actually have to start again and do all the reconsultation and all the rest of it. What I don't want to have is to go back to the parishes and say, well, you've got a controversial request, you'll have to start the whole process again. That is not fair to the parishes concerned. I think we should start the whole process again. Whether we start from scratch or whether we build on what we've already done could be a question for the next council.
Thank you very much. Next is Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like we're making this overly complicated. You know, this panel is here to make the hard decisions. We've done the task of collecting the information, the representations of various parishes, their opinions, and then we have to make a decision with the facts that we have in front of us on what is right to do for the future of those parishes. I think if we start saying, well, if it's a little bit difficult, and so we're not going to bother. I think that's dangerous, and I think we should reserve the right, to look at it, and those decisions we can make, and that we can enact by May 2020, we should be enacting. We've done all the work to make it possible. I think we should only be deferring ones that are impossible to navigate or that we cannot complete in the time frame that we've got. I think those are the only two issues that we really fundamentally have in front of us. We are not here to keep everyone happy. We're here to make parishes viable into the future, and that's our job and duty to do.
Okay, I'm going to intervene again, not with an opinion, but I'm just reflecting that the first two councillors who have spoken are probably not going to say things that everybody is going to agree with, but two of them have, so that's enough for a mover and a seconder of a proposition or an amendment. So I would like officers.
To interrupt you.
No, sorry, I don't want to be interrupted. I am chairing this meeting. I would like officers, while this discussion is continuing, just to think about whether, as well as what they're recommending now, which may well be proposed and seconded, whether they can help with a wording to reflect the wishes of the two members who have spoken so far. And I'm saying that not to be leading or to be unhelpful, but because clearly we're going to make a decision before too long. But I think we just need to avoid making a decision which isn't considered properly. So,
Chairman, I have put a suggestion in the chat box to include the comments made from the two members that have spoken. In other words, if that helps.
Well, can I say I'm not looking at the chat box because I'm trying to follow the debate, and I've also been advised that it is bad practice to use the chat box because people who are not in the meeting cannot follow it. I want the discussion to continue, and I will want further advice a bit later. So I think it's Councillor Thomas and then Councillor Cole. Councillor Thomas next.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I was not trying to interrupt, but the sidebar was not being used as the shared desk. Had the officer used the shared desktop, we would see that there was an amendment, which is one that I think came from the previous two councillors, which I would be happy to support, so that it reads, and we haven't got the shared desktop. Perhaps Alex could perhaps put the shared desktop up in front with the amendments that Stephen Taylor has put there. We can then move forward. I support what Councillors Kenny and Councillor Frost have suggested, that we should be able to make decisions. My observation was going to be, what number would be involved? We did have a list at the beginning. How many would we have to go through to decide whether they could be changed, deferred, or maintain the status quo? What sort of number would that involve? And whether Alex could indicate how many meetings this might require us to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's helpful that's been put up so everybody can see it. I want to continue the debate, especially as Councillor Cole is next, who always has important things to say. But I think at some point we're going to need further advice from officers, which is not just about what is desirable, but what is practical. And I think that will be part of the advice that we get before we move on too much further. Next is Councillor Cole.
You're on mute, Councillor Cole. Still on mute.
Is there anything that we can do from here to get him audible?
Is the meeting producer here, Louise Opie? I'm not sure. I mean, I can't unmute Councillor Cole. He might need to leave the meeting and join again if he's having issues his end. If you can hear me.
Sorry to interrupt. Perhaps you unmute all of us and then unmute him. It might happen.
Okay, I'll try that now. Okay, I have muted everybody, so if you did want to speak, you'd have to unmute yourself again. I can see you, Councillor Cole, but I can't hear you, I'm afraid. It says that you're muted. Yeah, it still says you're muted, and I can't unmute you from my end. Yeah, you may well need to leave the meeting and then rejoin it, I'm afraid.
It did unmute for a second, and then you clicked a button and it muted again, Dick.
How frustrating for Councillor Cole. So I take it he's just left the meeting and he's going to attempt to rejoin.
That's
Hopefully
correct.
that'll solve the issue.
Okay. I'm just pausing for the moment, partly because nobody else who is on the committee has asked to speak. So I'm just pausing to give Councillor Cole every opportunity to rejoin.
Councillor Cole, you might wish to telephone into the meeting instead if you have a phone near you. I can send you the details now.
I've unmuted. How's that?
Yeah, you're all right now, Dick.
It's working now. Great. Trouble is, I can't remember what I was going to say. So, really small point to start off with. The first paragraph of the recommendation. It talks about where non-controversial or where there's agreement. Obviously, a lot of the non-controversial stuff doesn't involve other parishes. So I think for the second bit of that, to be really precise, it would be good to say where there are boundary changes and there are parish council agreement, because I think that makes it crystal clear, because otherwise it's an or thing which doesn't read very well. So hopefully that was simplistic. In terms of the amendment, it seems logical, but we need to have a bit of a steer in terms of what capacity we've got for how we're looking at whether or not we take forward ones that are controversial or a little bit controversial, to quote Malcolm. And obviously we've got to provide some sort of list pretty immediately on those that we deem we can take forward, and then those are the ones that we need to look at closely. And obviously in the report on page 79, we're saying that there are 23 proposed boundary changes that have not been agreed by the parties involved. There's another 27 where we don't know if there's agreement or not. So there is quite a bit of work just for clarity on what does go forward in what we term simplistic. And I question how many of the controversial ones we're going to have capacity to look at. Now, I got to be honest, I'm struggling to see how we could do, for example, the Penzance area, the Golvels and the Haymoors. I'm struggling to see how we could really get to grips with Lanner Redruth and actually carry the process through with the confidence of all the people involved that it's being done as best as it possibly could be. So I'm thinking if we do agree in amendments, something like what we've got, we need to add some stuff in about the process that we're going to follow going forward in terms of how we assess how many we look at. hopefully that's helpful. And sorry for the problems, but it was really weird. Every time I unmuted, it waited a second and then remuted itself. It was really weird. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't actually disagree with anything that Councillor Cole has just said. And one thing can I say to officers, again, for further thought, because I think, again, I'm not trying to promote the amendment or what may be the proposition, because it's the only thing that's been approved so far. But I just wonder whether the wording can, if that, say, were to be proposed, can it clarify which of the options are being totally rejected at the present time? Because we've already heard from Councillor Fonk that he does not wish to pursue the Haymore-Gulville option. No, to give another example, as a St Austell councillor, I would not want to pursue the Boscopper option as affecting Treverbin. Now, I think there are obvious ones which are big and complicated and messy, which I would have hoped the wording could either sort of deal with today or explain how we're going to deal with them, so the areas of disagreement can be reduced to a smaller number, which then becomes partly a matter of principle and partly a matter of unpracticality as to how much we can cope with. And while we've been speaking, quite a few people have put their hands up. Now, Councillor Thomas, I think you're up from before, I think. So I will
yes,
bring in.
I've lowered mine. Sorry.
Okay, I will bring in Councillor Kenny, and then I'll bring Alex back.
Yes, I think Dick actually expressed what I was talking about rather better than I did, which is how do we identify where there is agreement? I would be very concerned if any of the controversial ones, we decided we would not do them. And that's what I have a problem with that second, because you're actually making a decision. And if you make a decision not to carry on with one of the controversial ones, you are by definition stopping the parishes involved in putting more evidence. So I don't think we should be making a decision on any of the controversial ones which results in no change to the status quo, because that is a huge decision and we haven't got the evidence to do it. So if I was putting forward a proposition, I would go for the first line and then say make a decision on the more controversial ones. We will defer until after the next elections, without actually specifying whether we then need to restart the process altogether or whether we can just build on the work we've already got.
Thank you very much. Alex, and could I ask if any members of the panel want to speak, to put your hands up? I'm surprised how few people are coming into the debate. Alex.
Thank you. I'm not going to attempt to sum up yet. I think we're a little distance from that yet, although at some point we'll probably just need a proposal on the table, which when the panel votes on will get us to a conclusion, conscious of time amongst other things. So just to quickly address, there, in terms of how we assess which ones we actually go ahead with, what I presume is going to happen, what I imagine from something like this would be that the next step for the panel would be to look at the detailed set of officer recommendations based on the detailed feedback from the consultation, which would be all made available to the panel, and on that basis you would make a case by case judgment which says yes, we're content to label all of these as uncontroversial and simple, and the scale of those is achievable given the resources and so on available, and then take a view on the remainder which says these are ones which we think are fit in the category of controversial. Yes, we agree these are controversial, and these are the ones which fit in the category of too big to bite, given the time available, and then make a decision about those ones in line with the second part of the recommendation that Stephen set out for you, about what the way forward would be for the latter ones. And what I can hear from the last couple of comments is that members of the panel are seeking to kind of constrain what would be on the plate of the panel then. So in terms of whether when you're looking at those controversial or big ones to bite ones, you have an option to defer and to decide not to do it, or only to defer. What it comes down to there is that discussion we were having before about whether you want option 2 or option 3 or a hybrid between the two. And what you have in front of you is leaving all of your options open when you're doing that that kind of analysis stage, to do either in line with option 2, defer a particular area, or in line with option 3, close it off. And what I've heard about some of the individual areas under discussion is that there are some places where it sounds like it'd be very helpful to be able to provide the level of clarity that closing off the process would provide, and some areas where leaving it open would be more politically and practically helpful to be picked up in later administration. What is complicated for us as officers is the areas you close off may seek to petition us further down the line for those changes anyway, and then we're left with an open process on those deferred areas, and then potentially a range of other processes starting in the areas that have been closed off. So it becomes complicated whatever we're doing, but this may simply be an impact of the pandemic and the way we find ourselves, having to find an unsatisfactory conclusion whichever way we turn before 2021.
Right. Next is Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Frost that yes, we do have to make decisions, and that's what we're here for. It's interesting these days, isn't it? A difficult decision is now called a good question by our present MPs. Whenever you ask them something complicated, they say, "Oh, that's a good question," whilst they try to work things out. I think we do have to get on with it and have having a system where we just have to say, well, these are green decisions and these are orange and these are the red ones, and the red ones obviously will have to be pushed further down the line when we have the opportunity. Everybody has the opportunity to look at the more complex situations and the pressures being brought about by the various things that are happening in construction industry. Orange ones then might argue they want to be moved into the red, or they're quite happy to actually be transferred into the green. I think we do have to get on with this, otherwise we'll be seen just to be a dithering council and a dithering committee, and that is not a good way I would like this committee to be seen. So I'm like Councillor Frost, we have to make some decisions, and maybe we have to have some sort of traffic light system that people can see, that then contend and say why they're just giving their reason of why they think it should be moved into the red zone, and then that would be put off for a couple of years or whatever, and why they should move from the orange zone into the green, saying actually our problems are quite easy to overcome. That's a complicated way of answering the question, but that's my attempt to trying to find a way forward. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. Councillor Jenkin has been incredibly patient, and I will ask her to come in now, please.
Thank you. I wanted to speak on the amendment to the amendment, because I think that's probably very sensible, although I think there needs to be a slight addition to it, which is about ensuring that further consultation with the relevant parishes takes place, because certainly in my area, I could quite easily take people out on the ground and show how patently ridiculous the currently proposed boundary is in relation to the natural geography of the area and the current building and the potential future building. It's neither fish nor fowl. It doesn't make any sort of sense. Both Houston and Wendron have agreed on a small amendment, which was originally proposed to the panel, and I think that would very easily go through. So the opportunity to change or amend, I think, is important, because within 5 minutes with Houston and Wendron in the same room, they could agree on the change of the boundary to the natural geographic boundary, which is the stream. What Houston wants to do further than that is obviously the source of the contention. Equally, unwarding Wendron Parish is also uncontentious. So there are elements that are uncontentious within the whole thing. So to have the opportunity to amend what was presented to council in December to something which actually becomes less contentious, I think is important. So the amendment that Stephen Taylor put forward, with a slight amendment to include the parishes in that consultation, I think would work.
Thank you very much. I'm now pleased that other councillors who are not on the panel are raising their hands, and I'll invite anybody else who is not on the panel to do so, because I've got Councillor Thomas and then Councillor Nicholas, and my intention after that is to ask officers for further advice and then to move towards the panel members making proposals. Councillor John Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I tend to support Councillor Frost and Councillor Wood's views on this. I think Councillor Woods made a very important part. We weren't supposed to make specifics about boundary changes, but he did raise Lanner Madruth. I don't think it's a extremely contentious issue. I think the practicality is there to provide a convenient government as far as Lanner's concerned, and we have done quite an extensive consultation, both parishes or town councils have, and it's been to the panel on several occasions and been to full council. So in this instance, I would actually propose that, or like the panel to support, shall I say, that maybe Lanner Madruth would move in, be in the orange section, if you like, with a possible view of moving it to a green. I think that would help the panel. I think Councillor Cole and different people have spoken well to support the Lanner case and propose that no change and the status quo remains. So that's just one view, Chairman, and obviously it is supported by Lanner Parish Council, maybe not the truth, but we have been through the process. I've attended most meetings, Artons and whatever. Picked up on a few queries that I raised with the truth that they didn't particularly have any answer for, but that's not a criticism, Chairman. But yeah, I would support that we go for the option 2 with the amendment, but actually push forward Councillor Wood's view and Councillor Frost's view of the sort of traffic lights view, if you like, and that we actually move maybe possibly this one, which is not, like I said, is not extremely contentious. It's purely practicality and providing a convenient governance for Lanner Parish, really. And obviously there are financial views aspects, but we're not there to consider. But the council intends to increase their size with the view to control or not control them, but looking after the area in question. So yeah, it affects all sorts of grants applications, all sorts, Chairman. It's a pretty important part as far as we're concerned, but I don't think it's that contentious. And then, like I said, it's been through the process several times, as I said, and been voted for no change. And maybe the panel would hopefully bear that in mind and move on to other really contentious ones, as you said, Chairman, St Austell and maybe Liscard or Weybridge. So that's my point, Chairman. Thank you very much for speaking.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Nicholas, and then Councillor Harvey. And I'm not taking any more speakers. Then I've given non-panel members a lot of opportunity. Councillor Nicholas.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and I do thank you for the opportunity to come back. Just listening to the debate, I think RAG rating might be quite a good idea, but I do think that Councillor Jenkins had a point that there may be some. I mean, I'm thinking of some of our controversial ones in my area where I think a little bit more work with those particular councils actually may come to a decision anyway. It's not really affecting residents. It's about how the irregularity of those boundaries at the moment are just not any common sense. You've got 2 houses in Gears Lane that are in one parish and the rest are in another parish. So it's about just making sense and common sense of the boundaries that we've got. So I think as long as it's open so that we can continue that process during this council's time, I would welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
I would like to agree with Councillor Frost, to be honest. You were put forward to vote on this here, and you should get on and do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, a man of few but very clear words. Now, I want officers to give us further advice, but can I just ask a couple of questions as part of it? Firstly, I think this is a question for Mr. Taylor. I was genuinely trying to be helpful, and Alex implied I wasn't. If, say, for the sake of argument, let's take the Haymore-Gulville issue. We're told by the divisional member that it is not prudent to pursue it during this council. We know, whatever we think of him, or indeed his residents, he is in touch with the associations in Gulville and Haymore. Can the officer report when it comes to the next meeting, just say, we're not going to pursue it? Or do we have to have 15 pages of text summarising all of the representations, knowing that it's not going to go anywhere because of the risk of legal challenge? I'd like advice on that. Secondly, I think we do need advice about capacity, because Councillor Jenkin made a valid point in desirable circumstances that we do further consultation with parishes. Now, I'm not sure what further consultation with parishes we can commit ourselves to doing. Strictly, we've already been told we don't have to do any more because we have done all that is legally necessary, and in fact we've done even more than is legally necessary. So what I think we do need some advice is that if we start bringing in areas to be still considered where the implication is there has to be a further process of toing and froing, is that, as I suspect it probably is, not realistic? And therefore the rotten options are either that you pursue without further consultation and you make decisions based on the evidence we already have, or we decide not to pursue it. So I think again, the sort of red, orange, green, whatever, that's come in since officers gave recommendations last. So I think we do need further advice, and then I'll be seeking the panel members' views on certainly one proposition, and I'm guessing there may well be two. So officers, back to you again.
Alex, do you want me to reply, or do you wish to reply?
Well, I think there's going to be a bit of both of us, here. So I'll start by saying I think in my introductory remarks were now some time ago, and I will just be direct about something again, just to make sure this is really clear. The position in terms of timescales is getting extreme. Every single day will count to try and get us to a point where we are able to deliver something out of this, given that we've had such a major delay on the process. Whatever we take from today's meeting is going to be dependent on what is practicable to achieve in light of the ongoing pandemic that we are inside, as well as essentially that, with the impact of that on our resources, as well as the council's ability to act in parish councils. So I need to emphasise that, and that does mean that things like additional phases of consultation and so on, which Stephen will comment in a moment on whether that is legally necessary and so on, I think would be extremely difficult to achieve, if not impossible, inside the timescales. Something else I would mention as well is I don't think in this meeting today we should be looking to say this particular geographical area we're taking off the table right now. I think that the proposal that's on the table is for that to be something that the panel does next on the basis of further information, and that's where I think it would be more appropriate for that to happen. So I'll hand it to Stephen for a couple of specifics.
Okay, thanks. So far as consultation is concerned with parishes, I really don't think there's time to do that. The mechanism that we had last time was that the divisional members were part of the process of the panel's consideration of the proposals, and so therefore a number of examples were that the the divisional members come forward with matters with their concerns to the panel, direct to the panel. I know that Councillor Olivier did, for example, and various others, and they made representations, and the panel listened and made their decisions accordingly. So I've got no problem with the divisional members putting forward views which they get from the parish council, but I don't think that logistically we have time to consult all the parish councils where there are disputes or where there is lack of agreement, bearing in mind that most parish councils meet monthly, and we really have days and weeks to do this rather than months. So far as capacity is concerned, obviously it depends upon what level of detail members want in their reports. The point about the that was intended to be dealt with by the proposal that was put forward for members to consider as the way forward was that the first part was saying, okay, we do want to go ahead. We're ruling out option one. We do want to go ahead with the uncontroversial proposals. I don't think we need to define uncontroversial proposals because we've said all where agreement has been reached between the parties between the parishes involved. So that's the first part. You are going to go ahead with some, if not all. The second part of it was intended to say, okay, when we do the qualitative analysis, we will then be able to say to you what we recommend or what the options are for members as to whether or not to maintain the status quo or to defer or to make a change. And I find it very difficult at the moment to put forward criteria as to what the RAG rating will be as to red, orange or whatever, because I think that I don't think there's any benefit to it at this stage because we haven't done the qualitative analysis. But I think that the first meeting of the panel where we do deliver the analysis on a number of this community network areas will then enable members to actually have a real discussion as to whether they want to defer it, i.e. just to put a halt to the proposals for that particular parish, or whether they would prefer to draw a line under it and say, okay, well, we thought about it, and in the circumstances we are making no change at this moment, but we are able to reopen the issue later on should the party so desire, when they can give us up-to-date information, etc., etc. So in a way, the proposal in front of you was just really to allow us to get on with doing something which would then allow us to progress the review to a stage where you can actually make decisions on the more difficult items. Does that help?
Yes, it does. I think we've now reached the point we have to make decisions. Would it be possible to put the wording up on the screen again? So that's before us all.
Yep. And
I will now invite any member of the panel to make a proposition, and I'm hoping that a bit like in planning, officers can help them if that is necessary to come up with a wording that gives everybody a steer as to what to do next. So I've got Councillor Kenny first off the draw. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you. I'd like to make a proposal based on what is in front of us at the moment, that the panel proceed to consider uncontroversial proposals in the consultation scheme to be identified later, or where agreements have been reached between the parishes involved. 2, the panel to review those proposals where agreement has not been reached between the parishes involved and decide, I would take out whether to make a change, maintain the status quo. I would go straight for it and decide to defer the decision, because I do not think we can make any decision on the controversial ones, but all we can do is to defer them. So that's what I would say for that. Anything that's not reached between the parishes involved, and to defer the decision.
Just putting words into your mouth, that is the sort of minimalist option.
Because I don't think, if we decide to make a change, or if we decide to maintain the status quo, that requires us to look at the evidence, to talk to the parishes, to look at the evidence again. I mean, when the process closed down in April, the parishes were resubmitting their ideas. So I just don't think we have the resources to decide to maintain the status quo on a controversial decision, or we have the resources to make a change on the controversial decisions. So I think all the controversial decisions need to be deferred. Now, there may be a red, yellow, green, where some of them could we make it. I just don't see how we can, because by their nature they are controversial, and therefore by their nature we will need to talk to the parishes and we will need to look at the evidence, and we simply don't have the resources or the time to do that.
Okay, that is a clear proposition. Could I say to Councillor Frost, if you would like to second that, keep your hand up. If you don't, could you lower your hand? That is lowered. Is there a seconder for that proposition? Councillor Wood, would you like to speak, please?
I bow to Councillor Kenny's judgment on this one. I think we don't have the time or the resources. We don't know what's coming over the hill with all these experts saying to us that we're going to have a second dose of another spike in the virus. There are so many unknowns, and to commit to ourselves to work which then we would have to backtrack on because we said we haven't got the resources, we haven't got the time. As she says quite clearly, and as Councillor Frost has said, we have to make decisions. So maybe the decision is to say, well, fair enough, let's get straight on with this. The ones that have sorted out go forward, and the ones that aren't, we defer, and that's it. I'm agreeing with Councillor Kenny. Thank you.
Okay, that's a very clear proposition. So I'm now going to invite anyone to make an amendment. Councillor Frost.
May I give some legal advice at some point, Chairman?
Yeah. Oh, yes, certainly. But if there is an amendment, I'd like the proposition, put this way, I would like to establish what all the alternatives members are coming up with are on the table before further legal advice. Is that all right?
Of course, before a vote is taken.
Oh, you have my word.
Thank you.
As a politician, Councillor Frost.
Well, I would like to make an amendment that we agree the proposal as it's set out, because I just think we're hemming ourselves in. There's nothing to say at the next meeting where we have all the detail in front of us. We can make an informed decision on whether we defer all of them. I think, to say we're going to just defer all of them now is the wrong approach to take. I think we need to sit down at a meeting, look at the ones that we cannot, and then make a decision. Look, we can't do that. We'll have to defer that one. We have to defer that one. We have to defer that one. And there could be some in there that we could actually make a change to and get it done and dusted. Whereas now this new proposal just hems us in and doesn't give us the freedom to operate, in a proper manner, I don't think. So I would like to propose an amendment that we take the original proposal as set out.
Sorry, when you say the original, do you mean what is on the screen now as 1 and 2?
Yeah.
So not
we decide.
Hang on a minute, wait for me. Not the possible amendments to.
No.
You mean the 1 and 2 above the possible amendments line?
That we reserve the right to decide whether we do make a change, maintain the status quo, or defer, because then we have all three options available to us at any time, rather than hem ourselves in right off the bat. Okay, that's proposed as an amendment. Is there a seconder for that?
Yes.
Is that Councillor Thomas?
It is, yes.
Right, okay. Could you speak next, please?
Nothing further to add. Councillor Lee Frost has said all that I'd want to say in exactly the same words that I would have used. Thank you, Lee.
I'm next going to ask, and this isn't totally closing it down, but does anybody wish to give notice of a possible second amendment? No. So what I will do, I will take Councillor Cole, and then I will invite Stephen Taylor to advise us. Councillor Cole. And I hope you won't have microphone problems again.
Can I speak on the amendment, Chair?
No, I want Councillor Cole next, please.
Well, you appear unmuted, Councillor Cole. While we're just doing this, can I just check that I'm keeping tabs properly? So on the screen, I've got 2 points labelled 1 and 2, and then I've got a possible amendment. But can I just check whether I've got that the right way round? Have we got something substantive on the table, and is it what's labelled 1 and 2? Or is Lee's actually an amendment? And is
no, the answer to that question is yes and no. There was a proposition from Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Wood, which is basically the first point, but with some of it deleted and nothing more. And although she can confirm that before we go to a vote, and then the amendment from Councillor Frost, seconded by Councillor Thomas, is for 1 and 2. Above where somebody with a clever hand is writing extra text in at the moment. Have we got Councillor Cole back?
You're unmuted, Dick.
Yay.
Hooray!
You can hear me, brilliant.
And indeed.
Yeah, I think what's been moved as the amendment through Councillor Frost is probably as good as we're going to get. I obviously made the suggestion that we reword the first bit to be a little bit nicer and more fulsome. The legal officers say it's not necessary, so I'm not going to bother to push that because obviously it's pretty clear what it says. And the second one does give us the option. I think for me, we've got to get the list of the proposed changes where we've had discussions and to make those decisions. And I think the key thing for me is if we go with 1 and 2 as set out at the top of that paper, basically we need to understand the process, how quick we're going to get that report, when we're going to do it, because time is going on, as Alex has said. And I wouldn't want us to over egg it too much and have a massive report if we're at this stage. Given that we've all been so involved with the process, we kind of know what's controversial, we know the information we're getting. So I would hope that we could have a meeting very, very soon to actually make that sort of decision. So on that basis, I'm happy to go with what's been suggested as the amendment, if you like. I don't support what Councillor Kenny has put. I mean, the wording says we should review them and then defer them. So in effect, you might as well just put that you defer everything that's not deemed simples. And yeah, so that's pretty much where I am. And I think we just need to understand right now what the time frame is when this sort of short report can be made available so that we can get in there and understand what's going forward, what isn't. The one thing that's really positive, I think, is that we've pretty much ended up agreeing option 2, which is stuff that we don't take forward, we actually defer, and then it automatically is picked up again in the new council. So at least that gives clarity to what we've been talking about. So hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Now I think this is the point for further advice from officers. Then I'll invite Councillor Kenny partly to clarify her proposition for the last time, and I think she wishes to comment on the amendment. I'll see if anybody else wishes to comment on the amendment, and then we will go to the vote. final bit of officer advice, which I think needs to include some of the very good practical questions Councillor Cole has just raised.
Stephen, I'd invite you to come in because you were offering some legal advice.
That's fine. I wasn't sure whether the chairman wanted you to say something about Councillor Cole's resources and all the rest of it, or go straight to the legal advice. The legal advice on the proposition put by Councillor Kenny, the effect is for the panel to bind itself to defer controversial, matters where agreement has not been reached between the parishes involved, irrespective of circumstances. And I have to say that legally is challengeable. So therefore, there would need to be some qualification in there. Is subject to special circumstances, subject to whatever. There needs to be some qualification in that. Otherwise, the council is binding it. The panel is binding itself, and that would not be right. As far as the amendment is concerned, I've got nothing to add to that. That's inserting the words whether to make a change, maintain the status quo, and that just sets out, as Councillor Cole said, that the panel has got freedom to decide what it wants to do, and when it sees a qualitative analysis of what the proposals are, it will have a basis to do that. Up until then, it does not. Right.
I think that's clear. I'm going to come back to Councillor Kenny now, just to clarify what your proposition is, and
I think we're all actually saying the same thing. The only difference is that I think where you can make a decision to make a change, maintain the status quo, to make a change or maintain the status quo, is actually included in the first part of the proposition, because effectively what we're saying is the planning proceed to consider uncontroversial proposals where agreement has been reached or where the committee thinks it's straightforward. My concern is that as soon as we get to the really uncontroversial stuff, the controversial stuff, then the committee might seek to make a decision without actually including the stuff that they haven't got time for. So effectively, if you were going to take one of the controversial things and decide we'll make a decision on this, then you need to go and consult the parish. I'm just talking practically here. You need to go and talk to the parish. So the troublesome one is actually number one, is how do you identify the uncontroversial proposals, or where agreement has been reached, or where the panel thinks it can make a decision. And I'm happy with that if they think they can do it. But if they are remotely controversial, then there's a whole round of discussions to be done, assessments to be made, go back to the parish, pick up all its arguments or lack of arguments. All of that's got to do, and I just don't think we have the time. So where we're saying we decide we can, I would put that, make a change, maintain the status quo, into proposition 1, because that's what that's all about. That's identifying the decisions where we can make a decision. And where we can't make a decision, we want to defer them. What I want to avoid is a highly controversial decision being made, which doesn't involve the parishes and whoever's putting it forward, because we simply don't have time to do it. I'm totally happy to accept anything that's legal that doesn't tie us down and all the rest of it, then that needs a change of wording. But I am concerned that the parishes, that the panel in the amendment is saying, oh, well, if we've got something controversial, we'll make a decision anyway. And I just do not think we should even be indicating that. But there's not a huge difference between them.
Now, look, I'm not going to comment on anything anybody is saying, and I don't want any more speeches from anybody. What I want, Councillor Kenny, can you come back again? Because
I thought you'd had enough of me, Chair.
Councillor Kenny, can you come back again? Because
yes.
What I want you to do is just to read very slowly what your proposition now is. I don't want you to explain it. I just want you to read it. Then I will ask Councillor Frost to read his amendment, and then without further discussion or hesitation, we will go to a vote. So Councillor Kenny, can you read your proposition slowly? And if anything needs to be changed on the screen, I hope that can be done while you are talking, so everybody knows what they're voting on.
So that the panel proceeds to consider uncontroversial proposals in the consultation scheme, or where agreement has been reached between the parishes involved, or where the panel can make a decision.
Hold on. What do you mean, or where the panel can make a decision? The panel can make any decision it wants.
A decision to make a change, maintain the status quo, or maintain the status quo. And I think that's going to be, this is an or between change and or maintain the status quo.
That is quite different from what you've said before, actually.
Well, that's what I meant. Because I think that's the big...
No, hang on. No, I don't want you to explain it. I'm just trying to get your wording. So is what is proposition 2, is that still part of your proposition, or yes. Is that right? So it's proposition 1 as on the screen and proposition 2 as on the screen.
Yeah.
Councillor Wood, are you willing to second that still as now worded?
It's changed things, hasn't she? She has.
Yeah, that, yes.
If you're unhappy, Councillor Wood, I'll go back to the original one and we'll just vote it. But I mean, I think this is what the debate is all about.
This is what the debate's about. Councillor Kenny has moved closer to the amendment. This is difficult, but I think either, Councillor Kenny, you go back to what I agreed to.
Okay, Councillor Wood, I'll do that.
I think that's safer than you're trying to find a compromise, trying to find a way forward, and it's not working because you're muddying the water, I think, a little bit for yourself. Yeah, and I'm happy to go back to your original proposition, which we can vote on, quite straightforward and quite simple.
I think I would say that in my own mind.
Right, okay, hang on a minute. Okay, I take Councillor Wood's point entirely. Councillor Kenny, another opportunity. I'm afraid you're going to have to go through it again and try to remember what you said before.
That the panel proceed to consider uncontroversial proposals in the consultation scheme, or where agreement has been reached between the parishes involved, the panel to review those proposals where agreement has not been reached. I think we need to refer back to proposition 1 to review those proposals where agreement has not been reached and defer those decisions. I think I would take out between the parishes involved, because was that going to upset Councillor Wood? Because that's already covered in the first bit.
No. Councillor Wood, what do you think?
I'm happy with that because I think it's straightforward clarity. If people are voting on it can see exactly what we mean. There isn't any fudge room or foggy waters, foggy room there. It's quite straightforward now. People can make a decision to either support that or not. It's quite simple and straightforward. So I thank Councillor Kenny for that clarity. Yeah.
Okay. So we now have a proposition. So I will go back to Councillor Frost to clarify your amendment.
Thank you, Chair. My amendment is that number 1 is the same, that the panel proceed to consider uncontroversial proposals in the consultation scheme or where agreement has been reached between the parishes involved. But I would like to amend item 2 to the panel to review those proposals where agreement has not been reached between the parishes involved and decide whether to make a change, maintain the status quo, or defer the decision.
So basically, what is up on the screen still reflects what you're proposing.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, now I will ask Councillor Thomas as your seconder. Are you still seconding that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Right. Is there anything further officers wish to say before we go to a vote?
Chairman, if the amendment is lost, I will need to come back and give you advice on the proposition. Because at the moment, my advice is that it is uncertain, unclear, and challengeable.
but it's perfect otherwise.
Otherwise, it's absolutely spot on, Chair.
Okay, no, that's helpful. So we will vote on the amendment, and then depending on what happens with that, we'll see what happens. Now, can Councillor Thomas and Councillor Cole take their hands down? Councillor Cole, can you take your hands down?
I'll try.
Right. Now, can everybody who is voting for the amendment and is on the panel raise their hands? One, two, three, four, five. I hope Democratic Services agree. I count that as 8.
Could Councillor Cole please just clarify if he is voting for that?
Yes. In that case, Chairman, yes, I agree with you.
Right, can everybody lower their hands? This is virtual fitness. Those voting against the amendment. So that is 2. So that means it is 8-2, and because there are only 10 members eligible to vote. Is that correct?
I concur, yes, 8-2.
Right. The amendment has been carried by 8 votes to 2. So we now vote upon the amendment again as the substantive motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. I think whatever the computer has done to Councillor Cole's machine has now transferred to me. So hang on a minute. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I'm with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, I think it's still 8. Is that correct?
8, yes.
Hands down, please. Ugh. And those against? Councillor Cole? Right, is there just the one vote against?
I would abstain, Chairman, because I can agree with most of the substantive, but not all of it. Thank you. I can agree with the first.
Okay. So I think Democratic Services Officer, we can confirm 8 in favour, 1 against, 1 abstention.
Yes.
So that is the decision of the committee. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Now, we will close the meeting in a minute. I'm just going to ask officers, do you wish to say anything now as regards what might or might not happen next, or shall we just close the meeting? I know officers will be discussing with the Vice Chairman and myself later today what we will do next, but the committee has made a decision. So is that all that you need?
I don't want to prolong the meeting, not least because we're going to run out of our 4 hours allowed slot, and because my laptop tells me it's going to force a restart in 13 minutes. So I'm glad we've made it when we have. No, I think the thing to do is to take stock, to discuss with the Chairman and Vice Chairman. We're going to need to call the panel together reasonably soon and do a lot of work in a short space of time to support that meeting. So that's in summary the next steps.
Thank you. Sarah Mason, Sarah, you've got your hand up. Would you like the last word?
Oh, thank you. That's gratefully received. I thank the panel for their decision today, because I believe that that's one which is an appropriate way forward. But I would just like to ask for a degree of momentum in this process now. Parishes need to have some clarity before they begin their budgeting exercise as to the sorts of area that they're likely to be covering post the 1st of April next year. And due to the COVID-19 impact on their finances, many of those conversations are going to start probably in August rather than drifting towards later in the year. So as soon as this panel is able to give some clarity around those decisions which are in the difficult category, I'm sure that would be gratefully received by the parishes.
That is a very fair point, and maybe you can help us by either yourself or through your chair, if perhaps you could just send an email to Cornwall Council to say that, because clearly, given what's happened today, one of the next stages is we're going to need to sort out the officer resourcing for further work. And I think if we had evidence that CALC is enthusiastic for that to proceed quickly, I think that will help those of us who are trying to achieve that.
I will email you now, Malcolm.
You are wonderful, Sarah, as indeed are all the members of the panel and everybody else who's had the stamina to hold out, and to Councillor Cole for his perseverance when life was against him. Another book there. So thank you all very much. You'll be hearing from us sooner rather than later. It's been a very, very good humoured, very, very logical and very, very constructive meeting. So thank you all for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malcolm, very much as well.